We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered, and we're on the eve of my day of camping out for my third Switch 2.
Oh, I was like, are you actually going camping? You don't
No.
seem like the camping type.
Just going to be lining up outside of a store. Weather's supposed to be nice, so that shouldn't be a problem. And
nice for
see how it goes tomorrow.
Canada?
Yes, nice
so
for,
like what?
For me. Yeah.
So it's very cold for everybody else in the world.
Yeah, it's supposed to be about 22 degrees Celsius. Very
that's not bad.
Perfect. It's
That'll
room
be
temperature.
nice.
Room temperature
Yeah,
outside.
that'll be nice.
A little bit cloudy, no rain.
Depends on the room you're in, I guess.
That's right.
This program is that we're using to talk to each other. What's it called?
Yeah. Jammy.
Jammy?
Yeah.
Jammy?
Jammy.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
It's distracting.
Oh.
It's very the things it does to your voice and how you,
Oh, I see. Okay.
the binaural experience I'm having on this side.
I mean, that's not
For those
actually...
of you that have never used Jammy before, which first of all, for what we're doing, it's fine.
Right,
But
yes.
for everything else,
Uh-huh.
it's very strange. It's a very strange
I mean,
thing.
all it's
So,
really
like,
is that it's not mono, that the voice bouncing back and forth between your left and right ears. That's the strange part.
It's supposed to be mono. I don't understand why it's not mono. It seems like mono would be the default and the easiest,
You would
but
think.
for some reason it's not.
The price is right, though.
So that is true. The price is right, and it's doing the thing we want it to do. So
right.
We're fine. It's kind of like when you go to the mechanic, you're like, I don't need my car to run good. I just need it to get me to the store and back. And you're like,
that is what we were looking for. I mean, it is peer-to-peer. It's encrypted. Nobody's listening in on us or storing our data anywhere. So, it's got its benefits.
maybe. Come on, Rob. Let's not assume that that's not actually happening. We always find out later that they were, in fact, stealing our data, and it wasn't as encrypted as we thought.
Yeah.
Mostly because we invited other people to the group chat that were...
It does seem
not
problematic
supposed to
when
be
your
there.
business model is free, and I'm not seeing any ads on this screen right now, so something's being sold.
Something's being sold somewhere. But let's live in the state of denial that we find ourselves
Absolutely. I mean, what are we saying on here that could get us in trouble besides almost everything at the beginning of these podcasts?
Almost everything these days is political. People get really mad
Yup.
about any sort of suggestion that they might not be 100% the victim in their own story.
When
And in fact are the evil empire that like, as much as you love Star Wars, if you've got a stormtrooper or Palpatine was right on the back of your car, you might want to rethink your political positions.
When you hear a criticism that is not explicitly about you and is in fact about historical events, and you hear that and you go, that sounds like he's talking about me.
I think he might be talking about me. I think he's specifically talking about me, not just as a whole, my group as a whole. I'm thinking he is targeting me specifically.
Might want to take a second look.
Let me just say that I have lost all my sense of humor. Maybe I haven't lost it, but I have lost all my ability, and I didn't have much to begin with.
Okay.
To temper what comes out of my mouth in group settings, and I've gotten quite a few looks from people recently that's like, you shouldn't be saying that out loud, and to which I say, well, but I'm gonna.
I mean, I do have to say I saw Leslie Jones's absolute screaming rant on the Daily Show.
I did not see that yet. I mean, but I will search it out.
Her whole comedy thing is just yelling about
rant.
things. It's kind of like Lewis Black, right? A similar sort of vein. I'm angry and I'm going to yell about things, and she delivers it very, very well. But I was kind of like, maybe that's just the reaction everyone should have just all the time. Just
I just need a group yell, and about $5,000 worth of therapy.
Instead of restraints,
as a whole.
It's that lovely meme of, there it went, my last F to give.
Everybody wave at it as it goes by. Goodbye. See ya. It was nice. There it went. Oh, she's gone. All right. So what's going on in Tom's life? Not that anybody cares, but I'm going to tell you anyways, because it's my freaking podcast, and I get to. This is the free therapy I'm going with. I did find out that I might be depressed this week. I was watching a TikTok, and somebody said this is a symptom of depression. I was like, uh-oh.
Well, that's pretty broad. That's kind of like when you type in your symptoms into WebMD, and you're like, no matter what you type in there, you got cancer. So I
was like, first of all, I didn't know that everybody didn't think that way. Let's start there. Mm-hmm. And then second of all, because I've been thinking that way for a real long time. So I'm like,
I mean, it's not like you're alone or it's uncommon, Tom. This is pretty.
Because I thought I was feeling pretty good as a whole, except for this one pervasive train of thought that has been going through my head for about 2 decades.
Okay.
Maybe not quite that long, but about 15 years. And I'm like, well, that's just how everybody thinks, I think that's how everybody thinks. And then they said, oh no, that's a big red flag for depression. I was like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
Dang it. I was so close to being mentally stable, and then here I am. So that was a fun thing that happened this week. Also, my youngest son, 15 years old, he's about to turn 16. So not that matters, but he's left. He's in North Carolina working at a summer camp for Boy Scouts.
All right.
And we put him on a plane on Saturday, sorry, and he flew up by himself. We got him through. We watched him go through TSA. And then waved at him, and then he got up there, and we talked to him last night. So this is Tuesday now.
It is.
Is it the first time we've talked to him since then? I think so. We've gotten some texts and stuff from him, but it's very exciting. He's going to be gone for 7 weeks, which is the most exciting part for me. No offense.
That's a lengthy time away at that age.
It is. And I hope he comes back a different person. And if you've ever had a teenager and you haven't thought, boy, I hope they come back a different person at some point, you have not had the right teenager, because most of us have had that thought. And that thought has been, somebody fix it, because it's broken. And
it can go a couple of different directions. You might come back different and not necessarily for the better. That's
not necessarily better. I am aware. So, we're rolling the dice with this one. But we're very excited for him. He's been to this Boy Scout camp a couple of times before. Okay. We've fully vetted the camp leaders there in the only way that we can, which is we know people who know them personally and have also been to that camp multiple times over at least a dozen years.
Okay.
So, we know as well as you can know. I mean, I'm sure that, people who have sent their kids off someplace and the kids have come back broken they thought they were doing the right thing too. And sometimes they didn't, or they didn't care. But, we've tried to make sure that he's as safe as he can be. He's got a cell phone. He can call us whenever he needs to. He's been told multiple times, what to do in the case of things going awry, and that we've got people nearby who can come pick him up, even though he's in North Carolina. Multiple people actually that live within an hour and have already said that they will go and get him if they need to. Okay. So he's as safe as he can be, but mostly this is just going to be a really good experience for him to, be away from home. It's very young. He's by far the youngest one who's been away for this length of time.
Oh, okay.
They've all been away at this age, or maybe even younger, for a week or 2 weeks or something, going to a camp.
A summer camp.
But doing this where he's actually working, and he's going to be working, and we just found out last night he's going to be teaching the amongst other things, his main focus is going to be robotics. He's going to be doing the robotics merit badge.
Fun.
So I think after a couple of days of doing that, I don't think it takes that long to do each one. I don't really know. I don't know much about Boy Scouts, I'll be honest with you. But he'll have done it enough times that it's going to become old hat very, very quickly, which will be good, because that allows him to settle into the routine and getting things getting things done. And then maybe he'll do other things. I don't really know. So that's very exciting. Our house search continues.
Yes.
For those of you, and for those of you who have ever searched for a house before, you know. I mean, it's not like House Hunters, first of all.
No.
Except that we all go in and say, "Oh, that's a nice sized bedroom," and then look at each other because we've all watched House Hunters and go, "That's like the most annoying thing you can say." But we walked in. We've been into a bunch of houses, and what ends up happening is, not everybody lives their life the same way. Like for you and I, there's always this thought of where am I putting the TV? Where am I putting the home theater?
In every room.
Yeah. It's so, I'm always kind of like clicking off going through the house going, okay, so when a boy definitely moves out for sure and is not coming back, this is the room I could turn into the home theater, this is the room I can turn into the home theater sort of thing. Because a lot of these places don't have that. Specific thing. And the go-to these days is to have, especially on new construction, very small bedrooms and a very ridiculously large entertaining area that's like open
like
kitchen,
really
open concept.
Big, great room. Yeah.
And you go through and you're like, oh my God, this place is so huge. And then you get into the bedrooms, you're like, I don't think I can fit a bed in here. Like I don't know how it's getting through the door. So it's like my parents just bought a place and they looked at the master really closely and they looked at the number of bedrooms and they looked at the kitchen and the yard and that sort of thing, but they didn't really pay attention to those other bedrooms. So when they started moving in, they're like, oh my God, these rooms are tiny.
Well, yeah, I've seen plenty with like the 9-foot width, which I'm like, that's skinny. That's like a twin bed pushed up against one side wall. That's all you can really fit in there.
So in their house, what ended up happening was off, the front of the house has two more like 10 by 11-ish bedrooms, which are small but doable. But then there's a third room that's between, these front rooms and the master. And that one is tiny. It's very, very small. I don't know the dimensions, but they were like, where, they were trying to figure out where to put my autistic brother.
Of course.
And, he's, in his 30s and, he's functional, but not super functional. And I was like, you need to put him in this bedroom, not by a window, by the front of the house. Because if he, for whatever reason, decides to start looking out that window, he may just decide to go outside and talk to somebody, which is not good. I mean, because there's no guarantee he's coming back in and, he's going to say weird stuff that people aren't going to understand. And, I live in Florida. People get shot. So I'm like, you got to put him over here where he won't be tempted. Like, well, my wife was like, well, he lived in the front room in your parents' other house. I'm like, yeah, but there was a carport and there was all these visual things. You couldn't really see the street from his bedroom very well. So now he would be right there if you put him in one of these. But now he's in this tiny bedroom.
But it's really small, yeah.
It is it's tiny. And so we're looking at all these rooms and trying to, all these houses and trying to figure these things out at the same time. And what ends up happening is you go into a house and you're like, yeah, this one works. This is it. And we haven't gotten there yet. And it could take us months.
And you're not going to find a basement in Florida, so.
That's not true. I actually found a basement in Florida already once. Yeah, I did. It was very small, and I hit my head coming out of the stairs. But, I mean, I almost knocked myself literally out.
That sounds more like a crawl space, Tom. It doesn't really sound like a basement.
It was, you could stand up when you were down there. It was not very big, but it was interesting. I was like,
you or I could stand up down there. Many other men could not, it sounds like.
Tell you what. You can't walk up the stairs without paying attention to where your head is because you're definitely going to hit your head on the way out. So yes, that's what we've been doing. My son left. We've been looking for houses and it's just been go, 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 go. So very busy. For those of you who are like, what's going on with AV Gadgets? How come you don't post as much anymore? That's what's going on. I still don't have an office. No matter what happens, I don't ever have any free time.
Yeah.
like, oh, we're not doing anything today. I'm like, I'm going to do some writing. And my wife's like, oh, by the way, I wanted to go look at a couple of houses real quick. Or, oh, I set up this meeting to do this. Or, oh, you've got some improv stuff that just popped up and they need your help. I'm like, oh, okay. No matter what. Or, your kid's flying to North Carolina by himself for the first time and your wife's freaking out about it. And Somebody needs to sit
The
with it
days
for a
do
while.
go.
They do. So what have you been up to, Rob?
Yeah, just really quickly, this week, my sister and her family, they're just going to be just a couple days, just a little weekend getaway really quick, because nobody has much time on their end either, but they can get away over to Vancouver Island just for a couple days, so they're going to take advantage of that while the weather is nice. And but yeah, just recently, they've got two kitty cats, and the boy cat was just recently diagnosed as diabetic. So got a little diabetic cat, which means does mean insulin shots twice a day. So I'm gonna be experiencing that for the first time. I haven't given a cat insulin shots before, so that's gonna be interesting. At least this cat, he is not the least bit bitey or scratchy or anything like that. But he does.
You give him a shot.
Well, yeah, he does potentially wriggle. So that's gonna be the very fun part. It might be cat burrito time if I can't do it any other way.
Oh. I saw a mouse get put in a piping bag in the picture on Instagram or something, which had something to do with research. They were doing research, and then they put a, like, you can't get the mouse to do what you want it to do, then you put it in like a piping bag and it has a little hole, and apparently the mouse is perfectly fine. I don't know. I mean,
can't tell you otherwise, can it?
I mean, I don't know if the mouse has much choice in the matter, but the mouse was like in this thing and it was just kind of like squished in there. I don't know. It was weird, but I saw it. So that, you said cat burrito. So that's what made me think of it. Go on. What did you watch?
That's it. Yes. Yeah. What did we watch? So I don't see anything on your list.
No, I
but
did not watch anything.
If something comes to mind, I might extend this just a little bit, because this week I did finish the 10th and final of the 2024 Oscar nominees, or 2025, but all the movies came out in 2024. Best Picture nominees. So Emilia Pérez, which is exclusively available on Netflix, because Netflix did partially finance this movie. When I say exclusively, as I've mentioned before, can't even buy or rent it. You can only watch this on Netflix. So I'm doing another month of with ads, and I will just mention on that side of things, not a single ad came on while I watched this movie, and there wasn't even a pre-roll ad. So I guess for their own content, they were like really trying to give you that okay experience. I did pause this movie at one point though, and there was a still image ad that shows up now on Netflix when you pause the movie.
See, I don't mind that.
It's not the worst.
I've seen too. That's fine. I don't care what you put on the screen when I pause it, because if I paused it for a reason. Unless I paused it to see something, you should at least let me see what it is.
The issue there, which is that it does just put up a thumbnail image of the movie you're watching, and then most of the screen is the ad.
Like
and
immediately, it immediately zooms that down.
Not literally immediately, but fast enough that the reason you were pausing was to try and check something out in the image, then you're not gonna really have the opportunity to do that. So slightly less than ideal, but that is where the ad showed up on Netflix for me at the moment. But yes, all of that aside, the movie itself, Emilia Pérez, lots of controversy surrounded this movie, and I'm going to put all of that aside. I don't care about any of the controversy with the lead actress or with, some of the subject matter of this movie. I don't care the least bit about that. Doesn't bother me one iota. But I will just say, I don't really think this movie should have been nominated for Best Picture. 9 out of 10 ain't bad, though. 9 out of the 10 movies, I had no problem with them having been nominated for Best Picture. I don't think several of them were really in contention for that title. But Emilia Pérez, it's not that it's bad throughout, but it is very uneven, and some of the scenes are just god awful, and I don't mean like the content is god awful. I just mean like that was a really bad scene in that movie. But not all of it. There are some very good scenes in this movie, so it's very, very uneven. Now, this is actually a French production. There's a French production company behind it. This is starring Zoe Saldana and Carla Sofia Gascon and Selena Gomez, and it is all taking place in Mexico. And I don't think there was a single Mexican person involved in this production.
Yes, that's what I've heard too. Yeah.
In Mexico, there was actually like a parody movie of this movie, which was all set in France, but all made by Mexico. And they like proudly put in the tagline, they're like, celebrating France without a single French person. And so that was kind of the way that some of the people in Mexico felt about this movie. But yeah, very, very uneven, and clearly did not have the largest of budgets, and it is a musical on top of all of this. And So one of the issues when you don't have that large of a budget is, what does a budget in a movie actually buy you? Predominantly time. That's the main thing that a larger budget buys you, or a smaller budget steals from you, is time. But the other thing that it affects is scope. All right. If you want large scenes, if you want dance numbers and things like that, when you have a very small budget, all of it gets scaled way, way back. And it really, really, really did in this movie, to the detriment of this movie, because everything is shot in close up. They don't have the scope to be able to pull back and show you. The dancers that they had, they're out of synchronization. They clearly didn't have a ton of rehearsal time.
Jeez.
Some of the numbers, like, nobody in this movie is a very good singer except for Selena Gomez. She really only gets one number, which did not showcase her singing ability whatsoever. It was almost every song in this movie was kind of a talk sing. It actually kind of reminded me of, like, Joker Folie à Deux more than other musicals.
I don't think that's the comparison they want you to make.
Right. Although these are original songs in Emilia Pérez, not just covering standards. But yeah, like the number that Selena Gomez had, it's like she's got backup dancers. They just shot it in a blacked out stage. There's nothing visually interesting in the background whatsoever. The dancers were not good. I don't want to blame them. Maybe they had like 5 minutes to learn the choreography, because that's what a lot of this movie felt like on the production side of things. And I mean, I don't want to lay too much blame at it. This movie clearly didn't have money behind it. And there were absolute limitations on that front. But yeah, I mean, Zoe Saldana, fantastic actress, was nominated for supporting actress, which doesn't make sense because she's the lead of this movie. It's called Emilia Pérez. It's about the character that Carla Sofia Gascon is playing, but Zoe Saldana is the lead character. It's her story. It's her character's story. So it was strange for her to be nominated as supporting actress. But she's not a great singer. She can do the choreography, but she's not a professionally trained dancer, and that shows. So some of the casting on that side of things was like, if this is the style of song, they were kind of going for, I think, a bit of a Hamilton type of style, where it's like, a lot of it is rap, a lot of it is talk singing. It's that type of thing. But it's like, if you're going to do that, you got to get people who nail it. Like, they got to be really, really good to make that truly stand out and work and be impressive. And this sounded like people were kind of mumbling into their microphones, and it was almost like they were, the voice you use when you're just singing to yourself? And not actually singing out to an audience with. Yeah. That's what everybody sounded like in this movie. Nobody sang full voice. It was unimpressive on a technical level as far as the musical numbers and everything went. There's not a single one I'm humming or thinking about afterward. Look, plenty of criticisms to go around. And then, yes, relatively early on in this movie, I was on the verge of just kind of turning it off, because there is one number between Zoe Saldana and a character, a plastic surgeon in Tel Aviv, with this horribly put on fake Yiddish accent that he's using, with zero ability to sing or stay on beat. I'm like, why did they cast this guy for this role? And it was so bad that I was like cringing. I'm like, I'm gonna have to turn this movie off if it doesn't get any better. And thankfully it did get better. So those are my many criticisms of this movie. I don't think it was deserving of being nominated for Best Picture. But let's flip to the other side, the positives. Carla Sofia Gascon is really good in this movie. The performance that she gives, all in the eyes, because I'll just do the basic premise of this movie. Zoe Saldana is a struggling lawyer. She's not making any money in her lawyering practice, and she gets hired by the head of a Mexican cartel, who wants to transition into being a woman, which, as you can imagine, is not going to go over well with the rest of the cartel, and involves a lot of moving money around and preparing and finding everybody who can do things under the table, including the plastic surgeon and all this type of thing. And so Carla Sofia Gascon was born male, did transition in real life to female, has acted throughout, playing both male roles and female roles, and everything behind the eyes, the multiple layers of thought of there being still this cartel head with all of the control issues and possessiveness and everything, and then trying to be a very different person outwardly after the transition, faking their death and, trying to escape and all this stuff. Like, that was all done really, really well. And it's a bit of a shame because the three main actresses in this movie are giving performances that are in a different movie than the rest of this movie. Like, they're all playing it serious, and they're all good actresses. And yet the movie itself and the script and the scenes are melodrama and, like, almost, I'm going to say, mock telenovela, because I don't think the people who produced this movie actually know telenovelas, but they're just trying to ape that style in a lot of scenes and ends up kind of making fun of it, which doesn't work out the best. So it's like, it's weird because there's some, pretty standout moments in this movie, but as a whole, it just absolutely did not work for me very much at all. And I was kind of questioning, why is this a musical? Although there was like two numbers that kind of made sense. And but yeah, there were things that I did appreciate thematically about this, because quite a bit of this movie, this isn't spoken overtly. It's not like in the script. This is all subtext, and maybe I'm bringing some of it to me. But I thought the theme of this movie was more than one thing can be true at a time. You can be someone who, like the main character, or Emilia Pérez, she has journals going back to when she was a child. Well before she was ever anything to do with the cartel or anything like that, describing these feelings of not feeling right in a male body, of wanting to transition and all of those things. That can be true. There's nothing fake about the transition that Emilia Pérez wanted to go through. But at the same time, you can still be a controlling, selfish, manipulative, damaging person. Both of those things can be true. And the movie deals with that head on really, really well. You can do horrible things and also do good things. Both of those things can be true. Someone can know you only from the acts where you brought them some peace of mind, brought them some relief from the suffering that they had. That's the only way one person at one point in your life might know you. Well, I mean,
that's how all the serial killers are like. Their neighbors are like, "Oh my God, he was such a nice guy," or whatever. It's all, not that I'm making the comparison there, but the idea that people can only know you from one, from one thing, and like you're in one situation and you're a saint, and in another situation you're not so much.
To the point where once that person is gone, there are people who are writing loving poems about that person, and it makes sense in the context that they knew them. So, I mean, that part of the movie I liked a lot, and the performance behind that I liked a lot. So it's not like this is 100% bad through and through, but overall, ultimately, I thought the shortcomings of this movie unfortunately outweighed those very good parts that I did like about it. And one thing that I did appreciate about it is that they did kind of go for it as much as their budget allowed. There wasn't a lot of like restraint and holding back. It's like sometimes it just didn't work. They took the swing and it just didn't work. There's one song in particular which is like basically just rattling off a list of different plastic surgeries, and somebody out there was like, "Oh, how clever and fun," and I was like, that swing and a miss. I'm sorry. It was like, it wasn't well performed. I didn't think it was really that clever in the writing of it. It was kind of a novel idea, and I appreciate it for that, and I appreciate that they went for it. They didn't do a half measure on trying to do that particular song, but swing and a miss. So that's the way I felt. So after all of that, now that I've seen them all, I just wanted to rank them. I just wanted to rank my list from 10 to number 1, how I would have ranked the Best Picture nominees. So at number 10, I'm putting Emilia Pérez. That's the one I really didn't think ultimately should have been nominated whatsoever. Number 9, I'm going to put Conclave. It was a well-done movie, but it's not something I'd be like, okay, that's got to be the best picture of the year. Number 8, I'm putting A Complete Unknown. Maybe it seems a little bit low on the list, but I mean, it's a biopic. It's not holding to the actual events that went on in Bob Dylan's life, and yet they didn't decide to fictionalize it into an actual interesting narrative. They tried to hold and it's just like
still boring.
Like I mentioned, the conflict in this movie is that some people dug it when he switched to electric guitar, and some people didn't, and I'm like, that's not much of a thing to hang your hat on as far as a movie conflict goes. Number 7, controversial, I'm putting the Best Picture winner, Anora. Now, I do feel like this deserved to be nominated, but I don't feel like it deserved to win. And when I was looking at all the other movies, there were things that I thought were superior in the other movies above Anora, so everything else got ranked above it. Nickel Boys, I put at number 6. That maybe could have been higher, but I mean, all of the top 6 are pretty close to each other. So that's where I put Nickel Boys. I thought that was one that took a big swing and hit much more than it missed in doing this unique style of first-person perspective, but then switching between 2 different characters in that first-person perspective. I thought that was an interesting, if maybe not outright unique, certainly rarely used filming technique, and that was a big swing that I thought was more of a hit than a miss, so I put it at number 6. Number 5, I put The Brutalist. I did appreciate very much the thinking behind this movie of making the movie itself akin to brutalist architecture, so I appreciated what was going on there. And yes, the performance of Adrian Brody, who did win for lead actor, that works. He was very, very good at this movie. He absolutely carried the movie. Number 4, The Substance. I adored 4/5 of The Substance. I thought the ending got so absurd and over the top that it kind of let me down a little bit, although the very, very, very final shot I absolutely loved as well. But I adored 4/5 of this movie, so too bad that I didn't absolutely love the ending there. But it won for makeup and hair, and it absolutely had to. If it wasn't given the makeup and hair award, there should have been a riot. Number 3, we had to think back a ways because Dune Part 2 was one of the 10 movies nominated, and Dune Part 2 is really, really good. It won.
It is literally the only movie at that. Well, yeah, I think it might be the only movie that's been of that length that I did not realize it was so long until, you know what I mean? I thought, like, even Braveheart, which I did not realize what I was watching when I went into it, I was like, is this movie going to end pretty soon? Like, what's happening here? Dune Part 2 just that was a time stop for me. That was a
really good movie. And it won for sound, it won for visual effects. Timothée Chalamet was nominated Best Lead Actor for A Complete Unknown. He should have been nominated for Dune Part 2. I thought his performance in that was really excellent. I think it's the best thing that he's ever done. So my rank for number 2, I'm Still Here, which won for Best International Feature Film, and I'm really glad that it did, because if it wasn't in my own rankings going to win Best Picture, then I'm really glad it won Best International Feature Film, because I feel it deserves it. Fernanda Torres, who is the lead in that, playing Eunice Paiva, she was nominated for Best Actress. I don't have any problem with Mikey Madison having won for Anora. I think that was well-deserved as well, but Fernanda Torres, for me, was the best female lead performance of the year out of everything that I saw. Obviously, I didn't see every movie that existed, but she was a true standout in that movie, and I think she should have won, which means, in case you couldn't guess, my number 1 pick for what I would have given the Best Picture of 2025 Oscars is Wicked. I thought Wicked, you put it all together, I mean, it is just such a gorgeous, stellar knock it out of the park movie. It won for costumes and production design, another one where if it didn't win for production design, this is the polar opposite of Emilia Pérez. Wicked had all the money, but they put it on screen. They built those sets. They give you the scope. The dancers are so precise. Everybody is exactly in synchronization with huge ensembles. Everything is fantastic in the production of Wicked, and so if it didn't win production design, that would have been a riot. But I thought that was the best movie of the year. So, if I could have voted...
That movie had no chance of winning, like we discussed when it came out. It had no chance of winning.
And I'm not mad at Anora having won what it won. It's just, in my personal rankings, if I was voting on the list, it would have been lower down. So if I could have voted, I would have given directing to Coralie Fargé for The Substance. You could see the directing on screen, which I guess is maybe the criticism. But I thought it was... it was a real standout as far as directing and editing went. Visual effects, I've mentioned before, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes should have won that one. But it was all Weta, because Dune Part 2 won the award, and that was Weta as well, so it doesn't hurt Weta, the visual effects studio, but that was one. I mentioned Fernanda Torres, I think should have won there. A couple of snubs, though, as in having not been nominated at all, and it's not surprising, given that the movies that they were in, but I would have nominated for Best Supporting Actor, David Johnson, for his portrayal of Andy in Alien Alien Romulus. Now, I didn't see Kieran Culkin's performance in A Real Pain, so, I mean, there's every possibility I would be like, oh yeah, that absolutely is who should have won for supporting actor. I don't have any problem with that. But David Johnson was not nominated. It's Alien Romulus. Was that movie going to get nominated? I mean, it did get nominated for one Academy Award, but not for supporting actor, and David Johnson should have been, because his performance as Andy is spectacular. And then, yes, for a lead actress, Naomi Scott in Smile 2. Yeah, again, Smile 2, horror movie, sequel. She's not going to get nominated, but she is that movie, and that movie is really good because she is fantastic in it. Do I think she ultimately should have won? No, I would have still had Fernanda Torres winning Best Lead Actress, but Naomi Scott should have been nominated. That was a stellar standout lead actress performance from last year. So there you go. That's what I watched. That's my ranking of the Oscar movies, and yeah, I loved Wicked. It's fantastic. It's only part 1. I'm hoping part 2 will be excellent.
I'm sure it will be. This is AVRant, the podcast that just does Oscar stuff now. That's all. We're done.
I mean, for this
Have
episode,
a good day, guys.
Could
and
be.
ladies.
We are already over the mark that a lot of other podcasts would be finished by now.
We are. Jeez.
Oh, yeah.
Those timestamps are important. We... the podcast that answers your AV and home theater questions. Get your questions answered. All you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. Come to the website. Find the show notes with the links, including a link to a Flickr album so you can follow along with the pictures. Mm-hmm. Any products or articles we're talking about, we'll link up there too, especially if you're like, I don't understand this concept. Well, we're going to link to the research. That or at least an article that tells you about the research so that you can understand it better. Also, older shows and all that stuff. Facebook.com/AVRant podcast, YouTube.com/AVRant. Come to, contact Rob directly, rob@avrant.com. His socials is @FirstReflect. I'm Tom@avrant.com. I do get that email on my phone now. So those of you who are like, Tom never. Yes, I know I never. Don't worry about it. I'm reading them now. I can read them now.
All right.
So, I want to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is going to avrant.com and click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, which will send you to a PayPal donation site. And if you can't tell by looking at the YouTube video, I am looking up right now
to see whether or not we had any,
because I forgot to
We've
look.
never done this before. It's not part of the routine. Why check beforehand? While Tom is doing that, I looked.
Okay, we did not have any PayPal donations this week, but we do have 130 patrons over at patreon.com/AVRant podcast. This beginning of the month, so a couple dropped off from last month. But that's okay. And what Patreon does is it takes some money from you every month and gives most of it to us. So we want to thank our 130 patrons, including Nelson, who let us know that he was one of our patrons this month. Thank you very much, Nelson, and to the rest of our patrons.
That's right. That is, once again, patreon.com/AVRant podcast if you'd like to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. Big thank you to our 130 patrons over there. And Nelson mentioned he's been a long-time Patreon supporter, so thank you very much, Nelson, for that being the case.
I can't believe I forgot to look that up. We also got notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going through. And there was a big drone strike, right, in Russia this week?
There sure was, yes.
There was.
Ukraine sent an absolute slew of drones in there and attacked Russia's bombers. Took out like 1/3 of their.
So if you're trying to
fleet.
place this in time, if you're wondering where we are, if you're listening to this, obviously hundreds of years from now, where we will still be relevant, where this information will still be relevant.
Yes. Model numbers will absolutely be germane.
Yes. We got notes of gratitude from Mario Ian, who says he blames both of us for sorting out his system well enough that he no longer gets to fiddle with its settings multiple times a week. Nelson, who says I guess he's a 2-hour plus club member twice, times 2.
Yep.
Though he doesn't remember 2 of the world scene. It just knows what they are, and that's close enough.
He can describe them without actually saying the words themselves.
That's right. says that wouldn't be AVRant without a 15-minute tangent at the beginning. Well, we beat that this week.
Satisfied.
And he really enjoys our What We Watch section. Apparently, Rob thinks about movies in a different way than he does, but it's still interesting and entertaining to hear a different perspective. And Henry. So we have Mario, Ian, Nelson, Henry sending us notes of thanks. Thank you very much for thanking us.
Yes, indeed. I'll say the names one more time. Mario, Ian, Nelson, and Henry. Thank you very much for those notes of gratitude and encouragement. We really appreciate them. And a big, big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions. And I'll just say, Nelson, thank you for that comment. I mean, that's why I do that. I just give my honest take, the way I think about movies. And sometimes people are going to be like, yep, I'm simpatico with that. Or they're going to go, oh, I never thought of it that way. Or they're going to go, Rob's a total idiot. But regardless of that, it gives you a point of reference to form your own opinions or your own discussion around that.
I'm so sorry.
I cannot
mute my
Gesundheit.
It doesn't mute. I haven't figured out how to mute it. That's the problem.
Plus,
there's probably a mute button someplace on this thing.
I suppose. Well, I mean, you can click it right off, but that makes a thumping noise. But yeah, the other thing is, like, ostensibly, the reason we're spending all this time talking about and putting together home theaters is to actually watch things. And so, I like to talk about what I actually watched in this home theater that I've put together, even though it's perpetually in an absolute mess with cables not having been properly managed and all kinds of things like that. But, I'm supposed to watch stuff in there. So I do.
So for those of you that have not noticed from when we have actually watched the same movie, Rob and I do not agree on how about movie things. So, and I think I actively make myself stupid when I'm watching movies because I don't want to spoil stuff for myself, and I've done that enough in my life where I'm like within the first 5 minutes been like, oh, I figured the whole thing out, and that's not fun for me. So I've kind of I turn my brain off when I'm watching movies. I just kind of enjoy it. I'm not trying to read too deeply into it until like a second or third watch, and I don't do that anymore because I don't even have a first watch. So to think, hearing Rob's perspective is always interesting to me because I'm like, I can actually listen to what he says and go, that doesn't apply to me, that doesn't apply to me, that doesn't apply to me. But this one does, and it makes me want to watch the movie. Yeah. Or this one does apply to me, and I know now that because he likes it, I won't, sort of thing. So I think that's valuable either way. I think I've mentioned it on this podcast, but there's a friend of mine who, when I used to drink, we would go out to bars, and if we didn't know what the beer was and didn't quite understand like what flavor profile it was going to have, we would get a sample or maybe just order one, and we would both take a sip, and one of us was guaranteed to like it and the other one was guaranteed to hate it. And that, well, that's not the same thing with Rob and movies.
No, we're not that far apart. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not that far apart. But, that's still a valuable data point in my life. Like if he says, oh, I just tried this great beer, I know now to remember that brand and never buy it because I will hate it.
Tom's still not planning to watch The Brutalist.
It's never going to happen. There's no chance that unless it's against my will in some way,
right?
Or I'm on a really long transcontinental flight and I don't know. And I've watched every other movie on the thing and TV show. In the news. And I apologize for sneezing. I'm sorry, guys. Back in March, you might recall that Sony announced that it would be halting sales of its home cinema projectors in Europe, even though they are the top-selling brand there. This was due to import regulations and trade restrictions stemming from the sanctions imposed by the EU and UK on Russia and Belarus. But now, 2 months later, Sony has announced that they will resume selling their projectors in Europe, but it's not because Sony changed anything on their end. Instead, there have been amendments to the EU and UK regulations that have just gone into effect and now make it possible for Sony to ship their home cinema projectors into those markets again. And the new Bravia Projector 7 can now make its debut after already being available in North America. So all our UK and EU listeners can now celebrate. You can buy a Sony if you want.
Yep, Sony projector. I'm assuming it's to do with some raw materials that are likely being mined in Russia. They are resource rich in some of those rare earth metals that are needed inside of like lasers and things like that. Perhaps some of the lenses, because there is quite a bit of glass production that happens there as well. So I'm assuming it's something along those lines. But yeah, so there you go. That's good news for the home cinema projector crowd in the EU and UK because, Sony is the #1 brand there for projectors. So it was kind of shocking when that first first announcement came back out in March. Wasn't super long, but there will be a delay, right? There was a delay in planned shipments and things like that. So in terms of restocking the shelves, there's going to be a several months delay, but they're on the way now. The regulations have cleared.
In the opposite of a surprise, TCL's QM8K series of Quantum Dot Mini LED backlit LCD TVs is finally official. So in North America, this is TCL's consumer flagship series for this year, with the only luxury X11K series above it. But in other markets, there's a C8K series that is basically the equivalent, and then a C9K series above that. Naturally, TCL is claiming even higher peak brightness this year because they have to. No matter, they'll figure out a way to measure it. They'll do something. So it's 5,000 nits to be exact, with up to 3,000. Up to. There's got to be an actual number.
Well, no,
3,000
because different
zones
sizes,
of
different screen sizes have a different precise number of local dimming zones, but up to 3,000 in the 98-inch size.
All right. And early measurements show that even when calibrated for accurate colors and grayscale, the QM8K series can genuinely hit 4,000 nits on screen, so you shouldn't need much in the way of tone mapping. More exciting than any of that, though, is that the QM8K series is the first to offer TCL's CSOT's newest WHVA LCD panels. These are vertically aligned LCD panels with high native contrast, but the new sub-pixel structure allows for considerably wider viewing angles without sacrificing color saturation and contrast. And again, early measurements indicate that it's the real deal, still not as good as OLED off-axis, but substantially better than VA LCD panels. The QM8K series also boasts TCL's thinnest bezels ever, which I don't think anybody should care about, but I'm sure someone does. And they've partnered up with Bang & Olufsen for, that was wasted money, for the built-in sound system. There's also filmmaker mode on board and every flavor of HDR, and once more, early measurement results indicate very, very good out-of-the-box accuracy. So the prices are 65 inches for $2,500, 75 inches for $3,200, 85 inches for $3,800, and 98 inches for $6,500. Those prices need to come way down.
I mean, those are MSRP, of course. Yeah. This is TCL. They are definitely going to be selling for prices lower than that in the not too distant future. The QM7K series that was released before this, already showing up on sale, already getting big multi-$1,000 discounts in some cases. So yeah, that's MSRP. This is the announcement of the things being officially available. That's the first prices showing up on stores because it is the official price. Out of that, even just at those prices, that 85-inch kind of stands out as the value one because it's only $600 more than the 75-inch, which itself is $700 more than the 65-inch. That 85-inch kind of stands out as the price to performance ratio topper. The 98-inch at $6,500, that's going to come down to $5,000 in the not too distant future because that's the same MSRP as last year's QM851G series has. The QM8K is replacing that series here in 2025. So it's good news. I'm excited to get an eye on this WHVA panel stuff because that of course is still the drawback of LCD is that you go off axis, and it's not just that you go off axis from an LCD TV and the colors kind of wash out a little bit and the contrast dips a little bit. Like you can kind of live with those things, especially if you're not moving around and noticing the shift happening. But what is clearly visible on most LCDs with full array local dimming is you get, even if straight on the halos around, small bright objects on a black background, straight on, those are being controlled pretty darn well these days by the top end full array local dimming TVs. But when you get off axis, that halo shows up and it's really hard to ignore. These new, the W in WHVA does stand for wide. The H is actually just like, a name brand thing. So the H doesn't stand for a terminology, and then VA is still vertically aligned.
Thank God it's there. I would hate to miss it.
Yes.
I would hate to not have to say it every time these things come up in casual conversation.
But it's really impressive looking. It's at least from the the videos and from the reviewers that I trust talking about it. But I wanna really go eyes on these things because if you're sitting quite close to say the 98-inch model, sometimes even just the edges of the screen are enough off axis from your centralized eyes that you notice that little bit of shift or that vignetting or that the sides appear darker or brighter than the rest of the screen. Not because they genuinely are, but just because of that off-axis angle to your eyes can make it look that way. This should help in those regards, and reportedly does. So, from people that I trust.
So when I'm looking at these houses, of course, like I said, I'm looking to see where the TV is going to go. Mm-hmm. And in many of the cases, it's going to have to go into a open concept area.
Okay.
And so I am looking at, I'm thinking to myself, look at the size of that wall. Mm-hmm. Look at, how far away to have to sit for it to make sense. And I'm thinking big flat panel is going to be, the LCDs is going to be it. Yeah. So I'm looking very closely at these things. And I'm actually interested to see if my experience with the OLED versus, it's been months now, but the experience with the OLED versus the LCD is going to be something that I'm going to notice. Because I think, I will always think this, that a difference should be noticeable enough that you go, I see it, or I feel it, or I experience it. Even with this whole you can only have 3-second audio memory or you won't be able to hear the difference. You should if it's that small, it's not a difference. It's not a big enough difference. So with this, I'd be interested to see how I experience one of these higher end. Because of course I'm going to get one of the higher end ones. But again, I might have time for these prices to come down because once I buy a house, I ain't buying much else.
Yeah, and if you are going a size above the 83, 85 inch class size, then the OLEDs at the 97 inch are prohibitively expensive. Yeah. Whereas there are definitely 98 inch LCD options that are within striking range for the budget for sure.
So we'll see. We'll see. Comments. Karl heard Stefan asking about Kaleidescape's players last week, so he wanted to jump in. He recommends heading over to Scape Owners Forum.
There's a whole bunch of things not said in that sentence you just read. So this is specifically about used players. And it's Scape, not scrape. There's no R in there.
Scape?
Scape, like Kaleidescape.
Oh, God.
Yeah, it's Kaleidescape.
Okay, I get it now. I think my brain put the R in there because the Scape doesn't make any sense. Okay, go. Scape Owners Forum, where they have a dedicated marketplace section that is strictly for buying and selling Kaleidescape gear, obviously used. Yeah. He would happily recommend buying a used player as long as it's a current model that they are still manufacturing. As he knows from personal experience, once you have a discontinued model, Kaleidescape won't necessarily be able to repair it any longer, so just be sure to go for a current model when shopping used, and you should be okay, or golden, as it's written.
Yeah.
So there you go.
That's some good advice from Karl. Thank you for that. We'll have the link to that forum in particular. I did mention it, but I didn't link to it last week, so we'll include it this week if you want to click on a link and go right there. Yeah, that's what all the people short. They don't want to say Kaleida apparently, so they shorten it to Kscape because it saves so many syllables.
Because it's actually called Kaleidescape Owners Forum. That's what it's called.
Yes.
When you click on it, but they just say Kscape.
And also the URL is Kscape Forum.
Is it really?
Yeah.
I didn't notice that.
Yeah.
It sure is. Look at that. Infinite Gary heard us say how those Dolby diagrams for speaker placement show one seat, or they show a couch, but with only one listener right in the middle of the seat, and all the speakers are aimed right at the one listener. Well, sure, maybe that's not actually ideal for a larger audience, but if your theater looks just like Gary's theater, Dolby ain't wrong. So we now get to see more pictures of Gary's theater with one seat.
One seat?
All the speakers pointed directly at
those speakers are pointed right at that seat.
So maybe he's just a little bit Dolby, but he's also never expanded beyond 5 speakers in his dedicated theater. And we know it's not because he's never experienced using more speakers at home. Sometimes you just nail things the first time, and adding more doesn't actually get you more, I still don't recommend this as a general rule. And the reason is, and we talked about a lot on this podcast, is not most speakers are not designed to be positioned in this way. Mm-hmm. They are not designed to be positioned dead on axis to your ear. They are designed to, and think of it this way. If they think that most people are going to hear a speaker off axis, they are going to care about that off axis sound more than they're going to care about the direct sound.
Hopefully.
If that makes sense. And that direct sound might be slightly distorted in order to make that off-axis sound correct. So, for example, you might have a shriller or a high-end tip-up on the direct sound in order to make sure that the off-axis sound has a more flat frequency response all the way through the treble. And if you point every speaker at your face, you're going to get a more shrill sound, in theory,
possibly,
depending on the speaker.
Depending on the speaker.
Than the speaker designer intended. So it always pays to have spent a little bit of time, and we know Gary's got time, a little bit of time to test your speakers in different orientations to see what sounds best to you. And to actually, I mean, it's, again, all it takes is a little bit of time to ask the manufacturer, hey, in a if I'm the only one that's hearing these speakers, how should I position them for me? Because they will tell you, oh yeah, we designed these with, we want the best sound to be at 15 degrees off axis.
Right. Good example
That's
of that
where
is
we take all our measurements.
HSU. He was very upfront saying, we don't really recommend that you sit bang on axis to our HSU speakers.
Yeah.
Like we want you to be slightly off axis to the straight ahead.
And the people who are looking at these Dolby diagrams and taking them as gospel law aren't exactly going out there and doing all the research that they need to do in order to get the best sounding speakers in general, much less dead on axis. So they're out there, they've bought a box of speakers from Costco. They brought it home. They go online. They look at the diagrams and they point all the speakers at the middle of the couch, and that's it. That's the end of it. And that's why I think those diagrams are wrong. And I wrote an article about it. And dangerous. And I also wrote an article about that one. So, because it doesn't give people the best experience. And in fact, for other people on the couch, suddenly it doesn't even sound like stereo or surround sound sometimes, because the ways that the speakers are pointed gives them not even a surround experience that they should be experiencing here. And it makes everybody else go, I don't understand why you like this stuff so much. Well, that's why. All right, let's get to the questions. Mario. So right off the bat, we won't bury the lead with Mario's question. He ended up finding a solution after some emails back and forth with Rob, but we'll save that until the end because working our way through the troubleshooting process might be helpful to other listeners. This is important, and I think it's very important for people to understand that two things. First, there is a process of troubleshooting in home theater that you should be going through if you run into a problem. I see this happen over and over and over again in the theater that I was talking about, the improv theater that I sometimes do shows at. They had a projector go out on them, and they bought a new projector, and it was I still think it's the wrong projector. They are convinced that they need this mat. I mean, Rob, this projector, it's three times the size of my home theater projector. Okay. And they're like, oh, this is what we need. This is the right one for our theater. It's 7 feet from the wall, and it's a black wall they're projecting on. But give me a break. It doesn't need to be that big of a projector. But they bought a new one, a new used one, or a new old one, or whatever, and they plugged it in and it didn't work. Well, it didn't work because the problem wasn't the projector. The problem was they had plugged it into a light that was plugged in, like a light thingy that was supposed to be daisy chained with a bunch of other stuff. And one of the lights went out and it killed everything, and they didn't realize it. So there is a troubleshooting process that we go through. The second thing is, I cannot stand when people present themselves as infallible experts.
Right.
And that's what the troubleshooting process is really about, is showing that we try things and go, well, nope, that didn't fix it. Let's try something else. Because we can't just look at your problem like Dr. House and go, oh, you're, it's polio.
Well, actually, House was a pretty good example of trial and error and the scientific process in that way. This is why pilots who've been professional pilots for decades still go through a checklist. Nobody's infallible. Yeah.
So Mario asked, about a year ago, he wall-mounted his LG G3 OLED in his upstairs living room and was fine with using the built-in apps for streaming. His Denon X1600H receiver is in the basement inside of an equipment closet, so he ran a 30-foot fiber optic HDMI cable and has been using eARC. As we know, this requires having HDMI CEC turned on in the LG TV, while the Denon can activate eARC as a standalone feature, but he actually has HDMI control turned on in the Denon for reasons we'll explain in a moment. He uses a Harmony remote. The hub lives in the equipment closet in the basement, and then he ran a wire from one of the IR blasters up to the living room to control the TV. So what was the problem? He prefers to have a visual indicator on the TV screen so that it's easy to see when adjusting the volume. I do too, and I haven't figured out how to do that with a NAD yet. So I haven't actually tried, which is part of the problem, but I would like to have it back, but I don't have it right now. If he just controls the Denon's volume directly with the Harmony hub, the volume readout can show up on the screen if he's using an external source device that is plugged into the Denon. But the Denon's volume readout won't show up when he's using the apps that are built into his LG OLED. That makes sense. If you think about it, there's, it's just sending the audio through the HDMI connection back to the AV receiver, and on the screen, all you're seeing is what's on the TV. You're not getting anything back from the Denon visually.
Yeah, you're not using the HDMI input that the Denon is feeding. You're seeing on screen is coming just from inside the TV itself. So even
inside the TV.
That's right. Even if the volume readout from the Denon receiver is working totally fine, at this moment, you're not actually using the Denon for video purposes. So if you want to see the volume readout, you need the TV's own volume readout, not the Denon's. Makes perfect sense.
So when he's using the built-in apps, he has the Harmony remote send the volume commands to the LG TV, not the Denon receiver. And with the HDMI CEC turned on, that was working perfectly fine. The LG TV would show its own volume readout on the screen when adjusting the volume, but it would send commands down to the Denon via CEC. And it was all working perfectly until last week, seemingly out of nowhere. Thank you. Updates. It just stopped working. The TV still shows a volume readout on the screen, and he can see that the Harmony remote is attempting to change the volume level, but the commands don't actually make it downstairs to the Denon receiver via CEC anymore. He suspects that automatic firmware update caused the issue, as do I. Yeah. So as a workaround, he reprogrammed his Harmony to send the volume commands directly to the Denon, but that means he isn't getting the desired on-screen readout. How does he go about tracking down the culprit and fixing it? And is there any chance that the 30-foot fiber optic HDMI cable somehow, quote-unquote, went bad and would need to be replaced? That would be a pain. I mean, the first thing I would do is unplug and replug in those, just reseat those HDMI.
Sure.
I mean, there's no reason not to do that. That's pretty easy, I would assume. I don't know how easy is to access the back of his receiver and his TV, but I would assume that would be pretty easy to do. The fact that he's getting other things up to from the Denon means that it's probably not the case, but I would still do it.
Yeah. Well, and it's
second
also
thing I would,
the portion, because there's 19 different pins on that HDMI connector. Now, normally, in a copper wire, those are actually 19 separate little twisted pairs inside. In a fiber optic, it's being converted to a single fiber optic signal. But, it's not out of the realm of possibility that the pins in one side of the HDMI cable that are carrying the video and the audio signals, those are still working okay, but the one pin that is carrying the CEC commands, something went wrong with that pin in one or both of the plugs on either end. It's not completely out of the realm of possibility. So I did actually start, we did this little email back and forth by asking, were there any other CEC features that were active, whether truly intentional or not. It's just the fact that in the LG TV, you're basically forced to turn HDMI CEC on. And then he did have HDMI control turned on in the Denon because he wanted to be able to do those volume controls. So I was like, okay, maybe it wasn't even what you wanted, but the power command, right? The power synchronization. Right. You turn one device off and they both turn off. You turn one device on, they both turn on. Or automatic input switching. Right, which is also part of CEC. I was like, was there anything else that's a part of CEC that was still functioning? You've got this volume isn't changing anymore, but they still power on together, or they still power off together, or something along those lines. Because if there's some other part of CEC that's still functioning, then it's very unlikely that it's the cable itself, right? Because if those commands are still getting from device to device, then it's okay, something in the firmware or the software messed up the volume controls specifically, but if the on and off commands or the automatic input switching is still working, then it's highly unlikely that it's physically the cable anymore. So that was one of the first things, and we eliminated that very, very quickly.
Yeah. So, that's a good troubleshooting tip right there. If it's working a little bit, it's going to be working. It's not whatever the thing is that you thought it was. The second thing I would have suggested next, and I don't know what Rob suggested. I don't know what the solution is. I haven't read through. I was finding a link for Gary. Is I would have looked back through all the menus again and just double check to see if they decided to add something. Not only that, but they could sometimes when they do these updates, things get turned off. I mean, get set back to the default setting for whatever reason. You have to go back in and re-enable them. And that's my second thing I would have done. And then if I didn't see anything there, it's almost like so what happened recently we have 3 cars and one of them's a truck. And it's a 2013 Tacoma, I think. And it's got a Bluetooth whatever. And usually on the radio, when I'm streaming music, it'll say the song name and the artist and blah, blah, blah up there. And then for a while, one day I went to the car, the truck I hadn't driven in a while, got in there and it was just like, you're connected to Bluetooth. That's all it says on there. You're connected to Bluetooth, streaming Bluetooth. And it wouldn't say the song name or anything like that. So I went and looked at the forums or whatever. There is like, just forget the connection on your phone, forget the connection to your truck or to your radio, and then reconnect. And that's fixed it. So
so
that's sometimes it's a matter of
go into the devices, turn the feature I'm talking about, not the devices, turn all the features off, turn them back on again. And see if that's... So I'll just mention one thing here because it's going to come up a bit later. When it came to that whole testing out, okay, is there any other part of CEC that's still working? Mario noticed, he's like, well, he's got a PS5 that's plugged into the... I think it's directly into the TV or... Yeah, that would make sense because it's upstairs in the living room. That was automatically powering on when he would switch the TV to that HDMI input, right? To get it there. So it's like, okay, so, CEC is still functioning. Something's going on there. It's not that it's completely off. So it was, it seemed like it was most likely just a software thing with that volume. And then... Yeah, he had done it on the TV, he had done it on the AV receiver, turning everything off, turning it back on again, and it's like, that wasn't working, so I was like, my suggestion at that point was, it's not my favorite thing, but full factory reset, right? Do the thing where, okay, the TV and the receiver detect each other again in their initial startups as though it's the first time they've ever been turned on and plugged back in, because sometimes that's what's required. They have to do that initial handshake all over again. You have to clear that cache of their, saved devices that they've connected to in the past, and a full factory reset is often the only way to really effectively do that. So that was the first section that we left off at.
Okay. So he considered doing full factory resets, but before actually going through with it, he wanted to know if there's a way to save all of his LG TV's calibration settings. He did adjust them, and he'd rather not have to go through adjusting every setting in his TV again if he doesn't have to. So what's the situation going to be on that front? I think you're stuck because I don't think there's a way to re-upload.
Unfortunately, no. And I was
remember them.
Looking at, the LG G3s, they do support AutoCal from CalMan. And I was like, does that give you the ability to save and reload? And unfortunately, it doesn't. The AutoCal doesn't give you the ability to save everything and reload it at a later date if you do full factory reset. So even that wasn't going to be a solution. So unfortunately, it was going to be a case of writing down all your settings beforehand, or, snapping photos of them on your phone and then manually putting everything back the way it was after the full factory reset. I wish it were easier and simpler than that, but it still seems to be the case.
No. Okay. Rather than jumping straight to doing full factory resets, which nobody really wants to do, and I don't blame you, Mario. Yeah. Mario had the wise idea to try simply turning HDMI CC off and then back on again for every single connected device.
Every single connected device, not just the TV and the receiver, everything that's connected to either of them. That's the thing with HDMI.
Yes. CC does not care about anything except, if it's going to mess up, it's going to mess up, and you have no choice. Happily, he didn't have to get very far into that process to find success. Turned out, as soon as he switched HDMI CC off in his PS5, voila, the TV was back to being able to control the dense volume again, and with the readout on screen and everything. Even better, he was able to turn CC back on in his PS5, and nothing broke. The volume commands still work. Now, he first noticed the issue when he was trying to use his LG TV's built-in apps. The PS5 wasn't even involved. CC doesn't care. Doesn't care about you and what you're actually using. It's decided something's broken, it's going to be broke. And yet, turning HDMI CC off in the PS5 of all things fixed the problem that only seemed to exist between his TV and his receiver. Can we make any sense? No one can make any sense of that. Not even the HDMI people know. I am convinced that HDMI CC is witchcraft. Do you understand what I'm saying? It is witchcraft. That no one really knows how it works or why it works. They just, over there at the HDMI group, they sacrifice like mice in little piping bags to whatever AV gods that there are in order to make HDMI work, but they don't. The HDMI gods want more, and they refuse to give it to them, and therefore HDMI breaks to punish all of us. It's witchcraft. So he says, can we make any sense of that? No, we can't. Could it actually have been a firmware update to his PS5, not his TV or his AV receiver that causes volume control command problem in the first place?
Yeah, it could have been.
I mean, it
seems
could
rather
be a
likely
lot of
at
things.
this point, honestly.
It could be anything. So whatever it was, he's glad that Rob asked him about other CEC commands, not just the volume, because that at least got him to take a look, and he probably never would have considered anything to do with the PS5 without going down that path. I cannot stress this enough. I've written articles about this. I've talked about it at length. Everything you know about troubleshooting every other problem in your life does not apply to HDMI CEC.
Yeah.
You have to think outside the box. And by outside the box, you have to think. I mean, I literally would check my toaster at some point during this process because HDMI CC might just go, there's a toaster plugged into this house someplace and I don't like it and I'm breaking. That's it. I actually believe that because HDMI CC, HDMI in general, but CC specifically, the troubleshooting is so hard and so non-intuitive that you really can't trust that anything that you think is real is actually real. You know, that you're like, this is only between these two devices. It's just the TV and the receiver.
That's right.
Everything was working.
Yes.
I just need to focus on these two things. That's not how CEC works. It is the entire ecosystem and sometimes things that are tangential to it. Yeah. So yes, I agree with you. This is very hard. CEC's troubleshooting is nigh impossible.
Well, yeah,
most
and I
of
mean,
the time.
Am I going to blame anybody who, like, it's not that they were lazy or that they were illogical or anything like that, who's just like, these things just don't, like, it was working, it doesn't work anymore, and I can't figure out what the heck is wrong, because by every logical measure of, you know, I've got three things involved. I have two devices and they're connected by a wire.
That's right.
And something went wrong. It's got to be one of those three things, right? But I've eliminated all three of them as the problem. What else could it be?
And this is what people will do. They will then go and buy a new device, a new receiver. It must be the receiver. Buy a new receiver and then plug it in and go, it fixed it.
Yeah, it works. Yeah,
my old receiver was broken. Right. And then they'll go post about it online as this is the fix.
And again, is that illogical? Can we blame somebody for thinking that way?
Yeah. And that's the problem with that's a lot of, I mean, that's one of many problems with not really knowing how to fix these things or how to troubleshoot these things, is that people, whatever fixed it for them, they think is the fix. Sure. It's just like a person with one child who knows everything they need to know about parenting because everything they did with that one child worked. The minute you get that second child, you're like, uh-oh. None of this stuff works anymore, and you realize that you don't really know anything. And that's the same thing with HDMI CEC. When you start, you're like, I fixed it, therefore just do this fix. We know from very long experience that there is no absolutes in CEC. There is no absolutes with troubleshooting HDMI. It can be so many things, and you never really know. And believe me, this same problem, it could have been the HDMI cable went bad. Could be there was an update on the TV. Could be that somebody sat on the remote. Could be a million other things. Could be turning it off, turning it back on again, fixes it. You know, and it would fix that one problem, but it would never translate over to, not never, but it doesn't necessarily translate over to anybody else's problem. So that's why we have to do these troubleshooting steps. Good job, Rob. Eddie says he was looking into potentially getting a Primare,
I think is how I've heard it pronounced, but something along those lines.
SP25 11.2 channel pre-pro designed in Sweden and priced at €47.50. That SP25 comes with DRAC Live Limited. You can pay to upgrade to DRAC Live Full. And all of its pre-out connections are RCA. It doesn't have any XLR connections. It handles Dolby Atmos and DTS-X, but no Aura 3D or IMAX Enhanced. And the thing that Eddie most wants to ask about is the fact that all of its HDMI ports are 2.0, not 2.1, though it does support eARC, which is perfectly fine.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to get it, would you be able to plug his PS5 directly into this TV and still get 4K 120 and VRR support? Does everything in the signal chain need to support HDMI 2.1, even if you're only using eARC to send the audio signal back downstream, as it were, to the pre-pro in that way? And if you're thinking to yourself, well, that's a dumb question. You're plugging directly into the TV. The TV has a 2.1 port. Your PS5 has a 2.1 port. There's nothing else in between, so why would it matter that the AV receiver doesn't have a 2.1 port? And I refer you back to the previous question.
Right, yes.
Because it definitely could make a difference.
So, yes. If everything functions as it is intended to, as it was programmed to, as it was envisioned to, this is no problem. This is, in fact, in a way, the intended way of connecting things, which was that you were going to plug your source devices that have matching capabilities with your display. You're going to plug those directly into the TV. And then when you want external audio, you don't want to use the built-in speakers of your TV. You use your enhanced audio return connection to send via HDMI to your full immersive audio pre-pro. And that is all meant to work. Now, sometimes there are glitches. That is potentially the downside, although it's not a guarantee that if you were to plug your gaming console directly into the back of your pre-pro and then feed the output of your pre-pro to your TV, that is going to be 100% glitch-free in every circumstance either. But yeah, of course, the things are you won't be able to see the on-screen display of your pre-pro when you are using your PS5 this way, because your television's input is set to the PS5. That's where it's getting its video signal. So referencing back to the question just before this, if you want to see the on-screen volume from when you change the volume on this pre-pro, that's not going to show up in this scenario, and occasionally that bothers people. And the other side of it is some pre-pros more or less demand that whenever you're using eARC, it's an automatic detection scenario only. And other ones give you either the option or sometimes only let you change to the eARC input with the press of a button on the pre-pro's remote, as though it were any other HDMI or audio input. That's the way you select it. And if it's the auto detection only scenario, sometimes that has glitches, particularly if you're switching inputs while everything is still powered on, or you leave your PS5 running, but then you switch to a different input on either the TV or the pre-pro, but it's this auto detection scenario, and sometimes those clash. So I'm just saying it is all meant to function. This is, in a way, what was envisioned and what was intended. It should function in more cases than not, but if there were a glitch, I would not be shocked when relying upon eARC. But yeah, since this Primare SP25 does not have HDMI 2.1, it cannot pass through 4K 120 or VRR signals, you would want to plug your PS5 directly into your television. That would absolutely be the way to go about things. Now, I just wanted to mention that looking at that back panel, looking at the capabilities of this, and then seeing the inside board layout and the way things are, I'm taking a guess that the OEM behind this particular pre-pro is Jade Designs. That's who also manufactures Tone Winner and Emotiva. They do look quite similar to the Emotiva Base X MC1 or the Tone Winner AT300, although those two models support up to 13 speakers, not 11, and those two models do not support DRAC, whereas this Primare model does. But yeah, kind of looks to me like it's Jade Designs that's behind this thing. So, yeah, I'm not exactly sure what brought him to it. Maybe it was the award that it won. Maybe it was some of the, little bit of hype that there's been online about it. But I just want to caution you, there are owners talking about their Primare SP25 pre-pros who are like, yeah, it's glitchy. It's glitchy, especially the HDMI. It's glitchy, which, coming from Jade Designs that we're familiar with in those Tone Winner, those Emotivas, not surprising. There have been quite a few glitchy operational things with those. And I say all that to say, feature-wise, There is nothing that the Primare SP25 is capable of doing that a Denon X3800 receiver cannot do. And the Denon X3800H receiver, even though it has 9 amplifiers built into it, you can set it to dedicated preamp mode, where it's not just that, it's 11.4 preouts are now active. They're always active. It actually completely electrically disconnects the built-in amplifiers. If you've got this concern that the built-in amplifiers are polluting the purity of your signal to your preouts or something like that, we don't, subscribe to that notion, but some people are worried about it. It's this is a full electrical disconnection when you put the X3800H into dedicated preamp mode. Now, I mention all that because if one of the reasons you were looking at this Primare SP25 is because it has Dirac built into it, and the Denon X3800H comes with Odyssey Multi-Q XT32, but has the option for a paid upgrade to Dirac. The things that you can upgrade that Denon X3800H to in terms of Dirac exceeds what this Primare SP25 Pre-Pro can be upgraded to. You can upgrade it to Dirac Live Full. I'm talking about the X3800H Denon here. You can upgrade it to Dirac Live Bass Control, which is not available for the Primare SP25, and very soon you're going to be able to upgrade it to Dirac Art, the active room treatment, which is definitely not available for the SP25. And if you paid the expected $1,000 to $1,200 price for all of that, including Dirac Live Art when that becomes available, and you add that $1,000 to $1,200 price to the purchase price of the X3800H, all of that together is still less than half the price of the Primare SP25. So I've just got to put that out there,
right.
Consider that. I'm sure there was some part of the hype or the award that got you excited, but owners are like, yeah, it's glitchy. I sometimes wish I hadn't bought this thing. So it's just because it's a little off the beaten path, maybe you really like the looks and that's perfectly fine. But I'm like, there's this weird mentality of, I don't want to get a Denon or Marantz. That's too mainstream.
Normal.
Everybody has those
you want
things.
To feel special.
But it's kind of if I want a really reliable, rock solid, and rather easily repairable, is not going to be in the shop all the time, luxury car, right? I want to get into the luxury car market. It's I'm going to buy a Lexus. They're super reliable. They're easy to fix. They're not in the shop all the time. And when they are in the shop, they're not in there for 3 months at a time. I get it back next week. It's and it's still a luxury car, and it's really rock solid, and it's really nice. But people are but it's a Lexus. Toyota makes it. I don't want that. I want an Alfa Romero, and I want to never drive it because it's always in the shop, and when it's in there for 8 months because I can't get any parts for it. It's why? Why? I don't understand that mentality.
That's every hobby has that. Mm-hmm. Every single hobby has it. Cycling's like that. There's bike brands out there that are they make titanium bikes, right? Titanium bikes, really expensive. Not as expensive as some of the carbon fiber ones, but they're really expensive. But there are certain brands that are that's just a Linsky. Oh, that's just a Lightspeed. I was cycling with somebody and they're I was it's a titanium bike, huh? It had a paint job. Normally you don't paint titanium. You just leave it titanium because it's cool. It's titanium. It can't get messed up. You sand it down. If something happens, you sand off whatever happened to it because it doesn't stick. And they're no, this is a Mosaic. I'm Mosaic? Never heard of that one. Yeah, it's from Boulder, Colorado, which, by the way, for whatever reason, if you want, if you have a bike brand, you better say you're from Colorado. Okay. You have to. It's a thing because that's where all the good bikes are made or something. And it's the same sort of thing. They're I think Linsky makes that bike. I think there's 2 or 3 titanium bike manufacturers that make their own frames. And I think everybody else buys from them, which is a lot like Jade Designs or whatever they're called. They also OEM for a lot of different companies. Joe is very happy with his JVC NZ9 projector and the 150-inch Seymour screen, excellent screen. He won't be switching to a large flat panel anytime soon in his main theater, so it's 150 inches. I agree. You won't.
Yeah.
Not every room is the right size or has the light control for a lovely projection setup like that. So our frequent talk about 98-inch TVs does have him intrigued for other setups hypothetically, he wouldn't be looking at the sort of budget that would offer him a 97-inch OLED, neither would I, more like around $5,000 or so. Well, if you wait for those TCLs to come down in price, you're almost certainly going to get there.
Yeah.
So he'd just like to know how we would rank the various TV brands and models that offer a 98-inch option around that price point. Would Sony and Samsung still come out on top if you can afford them, or has TCL genuinely surpassed them at the 98-inch size? Maybe LG, Hisense, or some other brand is actually the hidden gem not to be considered. What do we say? What are the rankings? I'm going to go with TCL. I mean, TCL's big TVs are kind of, unfortunately or fortunately, if you want to be like, I don't have something special, I don't want to have a TCL. My sister has a TCL. I think TCLs are it. I'm going to go get some more coffee, so you do your thing.
Yeah, no, they kind of stand alone at the top of the heap, honestly, right now. We're specifically talking the 98-inch screen size. And, like, honestly, the panel itself is almost certainly, when it's the 98-inch, almost certainly the panel itself is manufactured by TCL CSOT. Almost all of the 98-inch panels that are out there are. So, yeah, I mean, like I say, I'm really genuinely quite excited about that brand new QM8K with that WHVA panel. Really quite keen to get a look at that one right this second when it's first announced and first coming out $6,500. But it will get down to $5,000. In fact, at some point it'll probably be priced at $4,000 because it's exactly the same price structure that happened with last year's QM851G. So I mean, if you're looking at bringing that price down, right now, the new QM7K from TCL at 98 is already down to $2,500. It's kind of outrageous how quickly the price came down on that QM7K. So half the budget that you were proposing. And then even the 115-incher, which launched at $20,000, it's already down to $14,000. So their desire to get that down to half the price at some point this year seems like TCL is well on their way. So it's like everybody else is kind of chasing TCL at those really, really large screen sizes, the 98 and the 115. Now, Hisense actually is probably coming in second place there. It's just that the reports overall have been that, customer service-wise, quality control-wise, they're a little bit behind TCL when it comes to some of the quality control and the customer service. So when the price differential really isn't there, I pretty much just say, yeah, go for the TCL. So that's where we are on that one. And I kind of think they stand alone. I don't even really have a ranked list where I'm like, here's a second choice. It's like, no, you can get a TCL. You can get it at this budget. I think that's the best one. I think they have surpassed everybody else at that 98-inch and that 115-inch screen size. So Ian is next, and Ian asks, so, it might be a little bit embarrassing, but Ian doesn't mind sharing since it might lead to a fun little discussion. He knows that for a fact he's not the only person to have ever had a couple of his speakers actually running silent without noticing right away. And he's just like, has that ever happened to us? Have we ever had some speakers that, hey, we're pretty sure they're connected and we're in the right listening mode, but it turns out those speakers aren't actually making any sound at all. Ever happened to you, Tom? Speakers connected, but not actually making any sound?
I mean, yeah. To suggest that I have never made a mistake hooking up speakers is like complete fallacy. Not only that, but to suggest that I haven't wired them out of phase. I mean, I did that with the most recent ones. I haven't hooked them up and been in the weird listening mode that didn't have things on. The A-B button was pressed on the front of the speakers and that on the front of the receiver, and that screwed everything up. I've made every mistake you can think of. I've made. So there you go. So in one instance, though, he actually had his front. Did you already read all this? You didn't, right?
Not this part. Nope.
Okay. In one instance, though, he actually had his front, left, and right speakers turned off, and he didn't notice that immediately. With just a TV program, all the dialogue coming out of the center speaker, it took a while before he noticed that it didn't sound quite right, and discovered his main speakers weren't playing anything. So, it's always said that your main left and right speakers are the most critical in your sound system, but how important are they really if it's possible not to notice that they aren't even playing anything for at least for a little while? Tongue firmly in cheek on all of this, of course. I mean, it's all about the content. We know what he's saying here.
Yeah.
Your center speaker. And I have often said that the center speaker is the least important. And I think it was actually the first article I wrote on AV Gadgets was about how the center speaker was the least important.
Yeah, I mean, if you didn't have a center speaker, you're running a phantom center, and your front left and right speakers were turned off, like speaker A, speaker B, it's that type of scenario where, you accidentally switched over to speakers B and nothing's plugged into those, and your speakers A are turned off, so your front left and right, or you're externally powering them and the amplifier power wasn't turned on. So if you were running a Phantom Center, I'm very confident you would have noticed immediately that your front left and right speakers were turned on at that point. But I could absolutely understand just a normal TV program. Almost the entire soundtrack is just coming out of that center channel. It's like, I totally might have missed myself that the front left and right speakers weren't playing.
There's no music coming in, or no background sounds coming out of your center speaker. Like everything else is coming out of the left and right speakers, or even the surrounds or whatever. And only voices are coming, and they're not coming from anywhere else either. Because what would have happened if your center had gone out and your left and right speakers were working is you would still hear voices. They would just sound weird and just soft.
Well, I remember one time I went out to a full-blown movie theater. This was for Superman Returns, going all the way back then. Geez. But the intro came on, and they still used the John Williams score at the beginning. I'm like, that sounds way off. And then it's like the voices were still there. The fire at the very beginning of that movie was still going, but I'm like, nah, this ain't right. And it turned out in that theater, the front left and right speakers weren't on for whatever reason. So the center was still there. The surrounds were still there. And in that opening title crawl with the John Williams music, they had put a fair amount of the music into the surround channels. So it wasn't that you couldn't hear the melody whatsoever, but it was coming from the surrounds alone. There was no front, left, and right. So it's I got up with my, person that I was seeing the movie with. It's we're okay, just give us tickets to the next showing. But it's nobody else left that theater. Nobody else noticed.
Oh, they were fine.
That's
the way it's supposed to sound.
The front, left, and right speakers weren't on. So yeah,
clearly.
You doing it with a TV program, don't feel the least bit embarrassed. That's nothing at all. That's nothing.
Yeah. So Ian is trying to help out his brother who lives in Australia. He's got a LG C1 OLED in his living room, and he'd like to upgrade the sound quality with either a soundbar or a simple pair of left and right speakers that can connect via eARC. Mm-hmm. He does have an SVS sub, so if there's any way to connect that to the soundbar or pair of speakers, so much the better. His budget tops out around $1,000 Australian. So can we help him out with some recommendations?
Mm-hmm.
Well, obviously, we have talked on in here a lot about the Fluence speakers, and they make both towers and bookshelves. I don't know I think they all fit within these budgets.
But wanting the ARC connection,
yes,
that part, as far as Fluence goes, they do have options for you. Fluence is available in Australia. I wasn't able to find the precise model that I'm just about to recommend just yet, but it came out recently, and I'm sure it will be available in Australia in a short amount of time. So this is their new powered reference series. I'm talking about the Fluence RI71. That's the bookshelf model. And that one does have an ARC connection on the back of it, an HDMI input that you can use there.
Sometimes people say, I also want to have this thing, whatever this thing is. Does the C1 not have an optical or an RCA out?
I know for a fact that the C1 does have an optical output. Yes, it does.
So why must it be
right? Because we're talking about a stereo output. This is going to be a stereo output going there. Now, I will grant you, if he were getting a full-blown Atmos soundbar, and I'm not talking about one that fakes it or processes it. I'm talking about one of the ones that genuinely has separate surround speakers, actual up-firing drivers, all of that. So, it's full-blown Atmos decoding. That would require an eARC connection from your television. But if we are talking about a pair of self-powered speakers, which I'm going to be honest with you, for this budget in Australian dollars, I think that's the way to go. On top of that, when you already own an SVS sub that you would like to use, there are some sound bars that have a subwoofer output, a regular RCA subwoofer output, but they are kind of few and far between, and they are either, ironically, really dinky little 2.0 sound bars that I just wouldn't recommend, or they're over $1,500 or $2,000 US dollars, which is going to be way more than $1,000 Australian dollars. And the ones that fit this budget really rarely have a subwoofer output that you can use, whereas the self-powered speakers definitely have, the ones we're going to recommend anyway, definitely have a dedicated RCA subwoofer output. So, those Fluence are i71. They are brand new. Look out for those. Those are going to fit the budget. Those have all the features that you need. But another one that I like quite a bit is from Kanto. I've mentioned these ones before. It's the Kanto Ren is the model that, if you really are just dead set on that HDMI input, then this one has it. It has the HDMI-eARC port on the back of the Kanto Rens. Now, these I found just quickly posted on an Australian audio website for 1,100 Australian dollars. So, that's relatively close. There's a chance that you can find them for a better price than that, because that's just the regular retail price is 1,100 Australian dollars. But relatively close. So Kanto or Fluence, I think, are really good options. Now, if you really, really just wants the soundbar form factor, then for this budget right now, I would be pointing you at JBL. The Bar 500 is one that I feel pretty good about recommending. And for some reason, in Australia, it's 550 Australian dollars, which is like a really good deal because it's 500 US dollars and it's 550 Australian dollars. I'm like, that's an unusually good exchange rate that you're getting on that JBL Bar 500. Now, that one does not have a wired RCA subwoofer output. You're going to be using the 10-inch, quite good wireless sub that comes with it. It's one of the reasons I like the JBL Bar models, is that the subwoofer that comes with it is half decent. It's not like a detriment to the system. But interestingly, again, because for some reason JBL in Australia has like really good prices and exchange rates for whatever reason, you can actually afford the Bar 1000, 995 Australian dollars, which is like cheaper than the US dollar price, which is really strange. But this one is one of those full-blown Atmos systems. It's got actual up-firing drivers. It has fully wireless surround speakers that, interestingly, like, they have a battery in them, so they really are wireless. They're not even plugging them into power, and you recharge them by plugging them into the sides of the soundbar, which is kind of fun. So yeah, those are options if you really want the soundbar form factor, but you won't be using the SVS sub in that case.
Which is probably it would be a deal breaker for me. So yeah. The other thing I'm going to mention is, after living in Australia, like West Coast Electronics, I don't know if that's what was out in Perth when I was there. I don't know where exactly this person is, but there are still quite a few, like, Australia's a little bit backwards in time when it comes to some things that we don't see as much over here in the United States, but are still pretty prevalent there. And one of them is hi-fi stores. And you can usually go in there and find things that are on sale, like on the return rack or whatever. And I would definitely encourage you to do that. But most importantly, if there's not like a really desperate reason, there are so many reasons to not want an HDMI connection.
Okay.
As opposed to having one. The cable is more expensive. The longer cables are really expensive. There's no audio benefit. There's no fidelity benefit.
Not in a stereo or a 2.1 setup, no.
Yeah, to going HDMI, it's so much cheaper to just get a fiber optic or RCA cables. There's just so many reasons not to use HDMI. Like, they put HDMI in there because they're like, well, I don't know, somebody's going to want it or something. But there's no real reason. So if there's not a very good reason to want it, there's a lot of reasons not to, and not to use it. And it opens up your the potential for, like Rob said, using your own subwoofer with the subwoofer output on some of these things that, if you get the JBL bars that he's recommending because of the HDMI input, you can't use your SVS
sub with those, no. Which
would be a deal breaker for me. Nelson came across a sale on Woot for an APC SMTL 1500 RM3 smart UPS and battery backup. What actually caught his eye about it was just its looks to him. He thought it was the best looking UPS he's ever seen, with a silver finish, a front LCD display, and 3U rack mountable size. It normally retails for $4,000. Woot was selling it for $1,500. So clearly not the cheapest battery backup out there, but it has the notable feature of using a lithium ion battery that can power all 6 of its 1500 VA or 12 amp let-through outlets. It provides pure sine wave output, but it's still a line interactive model, not an online model. So any idea why it normally costs so much? Oh, that's the question? After all that, he wants to know why it costs $4,000 normally? Because people will pay it? I mean, that's why everything costs what it costs.
It's targeted at data center customers, and they just jack the price up. Plus, it has a whole bunch of software network features that most consumers are never going to make use of, but it's all that type of monitoring.
It is pretty, though. I saw it, too. I was impressed.
Yeah, $1,500 though, even at that Woot sale price, $4,000, I definitely wouldn't be buying it for myself. And it's not as though the lithium-ion battery runtime is like way, way longer, because that would be the other potential reason why it costs so much, is if it had a tremendously long battery life. But similar to other ones, if you're using full power, if you're using everything that the battery can deliver, then it runs for about 3 minutes, which is not unusual by any means, because normally you're not using 100% capacity, but that's sometimes the way these things are rated. So it's not tremendously longer battery life. Lithium-ion should require less frequent battery replacements than the lead acid batteries that typically need to be replaced on the order of 3 to 5 years of usage. But yeah, that alone doesn't justify the price, but it's because of the market. It's because of the market that they're selling it to, the data center market, and all of the network safety features that are built into it.
There's only 6 outlets on the back of this thing. It's not like it's that impressive for $1,500.
That's right.
I don't know. Yeah. I miss APC making home theater stuff, I'll be honest with you. David was previously using a pair of Hi-Fi Man HE4XX headphones, and while he liked their clarity,
the drop version. The HE400s, and then drop when they're doing their sales. They have the XX versions of headphones.
Yeah, whatever. He felt they were lacking in terms of bass, so he recently upgraded to a pair of Hi-Fi Man Edition XS, extra small, headphones, and they sound much fuller to him. They was just clamping tighter on your head, dude. So he's quite pleased with their sound. When he's using his bedside setup, he can power them with his JDS Labs headphone amplifier, which was a recommendation of ours. The new headphones sound great with that amp, but he mainly uses a Chromecast audio as the source device, and given the age of that model and the fact that it isn't being updated anymore, not all of his music streaming services play nice with it at this point.
It's a shame, because Chromecast audio was a great thing, but
we liked it.
It's been defunct for a while.
Google loves to kill things. It's like their favorite thing to do, is to come out with a product and then go, that's right. With it. Apple Music in particular is a problem. I wonder why. And even certain tracks on YouTube Music don't seem to like the Chromecast audio, so the bottom line is that he resorts to using just his iPhone as the source device. But the Hi-Fi Man Edition XS headphones are not an easy load to drive. It may be small, extra small, but they're extra mighty.
They're not actually extra small. I don't know why they called it XS.
You can't put XS on there and have me not think it's extra small. That's what everybody should think. That's a dumb thing to put on there. Just using the Lightning to headphone adapter, yes, he still uses an older iPhone model. So does most of the people in my family, actually. Very noticeably sounds much worse than when the headphones are driven by his JDS Labs amplifier. So he'd like to get a small inline headphone amp that he'd be able to conveniently use with his iPhone anytime. He lives in Japan, so it can be purchased on Amazon Japan. That would be preferred. And his budget tops out around 15,000 yen. Which is the equivalent of about $100 US these days. I remember when I was traveling in Turkey many years ago, before my wife and I were married, and everything, like there wasn't a smaller bill than 500,000 Turkish lira, which was fun. When you're buying a beer for 1 million Turkish lira, which is a lot of fun. So whenever I see something that's like a lot of yen or whatever it is, it's always fun to think of these big numbers. Doing his own searches, he found the Earphone UA100, which is a very affordable. It seems to have garnered good reviews, but would require that he buy his own USB-C to Lightning cable, since it only comes with a USB to USB-C. I'm sorry, USB-C to USB-C. It also doesn't have any volume controls of its own. The TRN Black Pearl, which is even less expensive, but does have its own volume control. And the FIO, I hope that's what that is, or it's two L's, or it's just 2 lines.
I don't know if I usually hear it said as FIO, but I don't know what the actual pronunciation they want is, but yes, FIIO.
It's somebody just smacked their hands on the keyboard. KA 13, which claims to have the most power, although only in desktop mode, whatever that means, and mentions coming with a USB-C to Lightning adapter, but it costs the most by a healthy margin. Are any of those a clear standout, or is there a different brand and model entirely they ought to get instead? I don't know. I do say that their headphones, for the most part, are fine, and I have liked them. Pretty universally, they've been good. I don't really think there's that many headphone manufacturers in the world. Just like I don't think there's that many, pre-pro manufacturers in the world. I think there's a bunch that come out of the same factories with slightly different form factors and different labeling on it. And I think Earphone is one of those.
Yep.
And they're just taking other things and slapping, doing their little tweaks to it, maybe, and putting their name on it. So I think Earphone is the same way. I got no problems with that. I don't think there's any issue with it as long as the product they're putting out is good. And for the most part, Earphone headphones have been very good. And so as a brand, I would trust them.
Yep, that Earphone UA100, the out of the three that you mentioned, that would probably be the one I would go with there. The FiO ones, they have a healthy amount of power. They also, unfortunately, have a noise floor. And some people don't seem to be bothered by the bit of the hiss there, but it's just, there's a pile of gain, which means they can get loud. They can get real loud, and sometimes that's what people are after, but unfortunately, the noise floor is up there too. That other one that was mentioned, the TRN, I have absolutely no familiarity with that one at all. But the Earphone that you mentioned, it is, for all intents and purposes, a rebranded Shanling UA2. Those are basically the exact same device. In fact, people have discovered that if you get the Shanling app, that it detects the Earphone UA100, even though the UA100 does not come with the same app. So the innards of it are basically identical, and that would be an option too. The Shanling UA2 would be an option, but it's actually more expensive than the Earphone, and they're the same thing. Now, over at the Wirecutter, Brett Butterworth's top recommendation here is from Fosse, another brand that we love. Fosse Audio's DS1 or DS2 are almost the same, and if you really want that volume control on the dongle itself, then these would be ones to look at, the Fosse DS1 or DS2. Did mention that the DS1 is a little bit nicer to use because it remembers your previous volume setting, and for whatever reason, the DS2 does not. The DS2 struggles to remember the previous volume setting that you were using when you plug it back into your phone. If you had unplugged it, the DS1 remembers. Thing was, I couldn't find the DS1 listed on Amazon Japan, and I could find the DS2. Doesn't mean the DS1 is not available in Japan. It's just when I did a quick search on Amazon Japan, the DS2 showed up, the DS1 didn't. I would have a look at either that Fosse or that Earphone one that you already found. I'd be no problem with that, but it just doesn't have the volume control built in, just like the Shanling UA2 that it's based on.
Yeah. Henry, the Kaleidescape agonizing continues. Really? Are we agonizing over it? Do you know how many movies you can buy for the cost of the player?
That's going to come up. Yep.
But he's pretty sure he has settled on the course of action for now, so let's just double-check his line of thinking for him, shall we? First up, he appreciated our previous advice to consider getting an NVIDIA Shield and making his own Plex setup instead of backing up his collection of discs. Instead, by backing up his collection of discs, he decided to research that option, and while it's clearly much more cost-effective, there doesn't seem to be any way of avoiding the fact that it would be time-consuming.
You are correct.
No, there's definitely a way to avoid it. It's pay someone else to do it.
I see.
And you still will come out on top over...
Maybe.
I almost guarantee you could find somebody to do it for you that for less than it would cost to get a Kaleidescape player. Almost guarantee you.
I mean, it's not super labor intensive. It's just putting discs in,
time.
Using Make MKV and just the one-to-one backup. You're not even opening the disc and actually converting it to an MKV. You're just doing the one-to-one backup. Yeah.
Okay. Both money and time are in shorter supplies these days, and so he wound up back on the phone with his local AV dealer and directly with Kaleidescape, and that new 3000 Strato E model definitely piqued his interest. And happily, he found a local shop with a Kaleidescape player set up in their showroom so they can experience it in person. Even better, they also had an Ultra HD Blu-ray player in the same setup, and they said it would be fine for him to bring his own discs in order to compare them to the Kaleidescape versions. So here's his experience. There wasn't much of a difference between the discs and the Kaleidescape systems, which is what you would expect. It's supposed to be a one-to-one thing. whatever. He really did not see any difference in the video quality, and while he did hear a few differences in the audio, it was more along the lines of they just sounded slightly different here and there, but not necessarily better or worse, just different. And none of the differences were jaw-dropping, easy for me to say. Where the Kaleidescape had a clear advantage was in your user interface, very impressive, very slick, and as we've mentioned, they typically have new movie releases available well before the discs are available to purchase. But as we've also mentioned, if he just holds onto his $3,000, that buys a lot of discs, even if he has to wait a couple of months longer to get them. I mean, who really cares? But what was very evident to him during that demo, though, was that both the discs and the Kaleidescape do still look and sound better than streaming. So he has drawn the conclusion that if and when the discs really do die out or simply become prohibitively expensive, that's when he'll switch to Kaleidescape. For now, he's going to hold off. Unless a killer sale on Kaleidescape players comes along, which will never happen. So whatever. I guess you could have used one. We just talked about that. So what do we think? Has he come to a reasonable conclusion, or is this a case where the experience in the showroom was actually misleading? It would be totally different experience at home. I don't know how you decided that it was better than streaming, other than the fact that you think that you could compare streaming to the disc and then compare the disc to the Kaleidescape, and then the disc to the Kaleidescape seem the same, so therefore
that's detectable. It's going
to be better than streaming.
Yeah, that I don't disagree with that. That is. I
mean, he's just to claim it to be definitively better. I could have taken my Thor Ragnarok disc and compared it to streaming and gone, nope, the streaming's definitely better.
For that one example, yeah.
For that one disc.
But yeah, no, I mean, it is like, we are in this transition time, this situation where it's like, yeah, I mean, discs are starting to become harder to find. Not every movie is being released in Ultra HD Blu-ray, that's for sure. There are 4K versions on Kaleidescape that there is no Ultra HD version. There's a Blu-ray version, there's definitely a DVD version, but not always an Ultra HD, 4K version on disc, and Kaleidescape has movies in 4K with Atmos and HDR that aren't available physically. So, I mean, that is another thing to consider there. But we're in this sort of transition time where it seems like discs are definitely on the decline. And if that's like, okay, I want the superior quality compared to streaming, and I want the early releases, and I want some of these releases that aren't available physically. It's like those are the things. So no, I think you came to the right conclusion. I think there will come a tipping point. I think there will come a time, and it's really nice to know that Kaleidescape has dipped their toe into these lower price ranges where it isn't $10,000 plus just to get your foot in the door, where you could do it for $2,000 now with that Strato M. So yeah, I think you're perfectly fine, logical thinking. Hold off until that tipping point happens. I think you'll know. You'll be like, wait a second. There's like a whole bunch of movies I want that just aren't coming out on physical disc anymore in Ultra HD format anymore. It's like, okay, it's time. It's time at that point.
I have a challenge for you, and this is the challenge I have for you. I would like to challenge you to rip one movie to file. The same way that you would do it if you were going to set up a Plex server and all that stuff. Don't set up the Plex server. Don't do any of those things.
Although that would require, if he doesn't have one, purchasing an Ultra HD capable drive that can put the Libre drive firmware on there. Yeah.
I for sure. This costs a little bit of money. Maybe you've already got the equipment. I don't know. But I would challenge you to rip one disc to file and see how hard it is. And then just sit. Oops, sorry, I hit my microphone. Just live with that for a little while, and then if you're like, you know what, I wonder what it would be like if I downloaded Plex on one of my many devices I have, and then tried to stream it. I wonder what that would feel like, and how hard that would be to set up. So I think the problem with the setting, and this is for me as well, I'm talking to myself as much as I'm talking to you, with setting up the Plex server is that as a whole, it seems like a lot, and I don't want to do a lot.
Yeah, if you're starting from zero to the end of the process, it's this mountain.
If you just look at the light at the end of the tunnel, it's way far away. It doesn't seem like it's possible to get there. So what I need to do for myself is I need to go and decide I'm going to do this, but I'm only going to do a little bit of it.
Sure.
And it's going to be a lot easier for me because I don't have a bunch of discs anymore. Right. All my discs, I throw them all out. So there's not that problem anymore. And then I can rip, if I just rip one get the equipment and rip one. And, and there's no timeline on this. You could do this over the next year. It's like, I'm just keep my eyes open for a disk drive that goes on sale or it's on Woots or whatever. I find one used. I just keep my eyes open for a drive that I can connect to my computer so I can rip one disk. I just want to rip one. I just want to see what it's going to be like. And then you just, baby step it until you get to the point where you're like, well, all I have to do is rip a bunch of disks now. Every day I'll just put one or two in while I'm having dinner. Yeah. And rip some until I've got my entire library. So that's what I would challenge you to do.
Okay.
Ryan. Wait a second here. I don't want to get burned again like I did last week doing a million a year. Okay, last question.
If we want to not do every single one of Ryan's questions, that's okay. We stop when we need to stop here. But we'll begin. We'll begin. Yes.
This is too much. We should just stop now. This is a lot.
You could look at all this. This could end up eating up a lot of next week. So let's go to at least the 2-hour mark. All
right, Ryan part 1. Ryan wants to dig into a dual subwoofer setup, which is obviously a topic we have discussed many times in the past, but we aren't the only ones, and there's conflicting or just plain confusing advice out there. Mm-hmm. So he would appreciate our help in sorting out what is what. What is what is we're right, and anybody who contradicts us is wrong. I cannot stress this enough. I'm not saying that we can't ever be wrong, but as of this moment in time, like if you're listening to this 5 years from now, when Drac art wall crap, whatever the heck it is that they come out with, and everything is supposed to be 17 subwoofers at the front of your room and 16 subwoofers at the back of your room, until that becomes a reality or whatever comes out. As of this moment, we are right. There is no more right than us, and anything that contradicts what we say is wrong. Okay. So let's just go with that. And this is not. I told you I like being wrong. I like us showing that we're fallible, and we are fallible. But on this topic, at this moment, with the knowledge that has collectively been gained by the human race when it comes to subwoofers, we are right. So he came across a YouTube video claiming to have found a hack that really helps reduce bass cancellation. He calls it the distance hack. Oh my God. Welcome to 20 years ago, first of all. It's not that big of a hack. And he says that the distance setting that gets set by your automated room correction is rarely correct, and you'll get much better results if you manually add between 1 and 5 feet to the subwoofer distance setting after your automated room correction has been run. Is that good advice or not? It is not. All that's doing is changing the phase.
Right.
So
the phase
it's the
relationship between the subwoofer output and all the rest of your speakers. Yeah.
So think of it this way. In order for the sound to arrive at your seat at the same, if all things being equal, if you're in a big open space, right, and your subwoofer was 30 feet away from you, and your speakers were 5 feet away from you, and you set that distance setting, all it would do is change the time the sound arrived at your seat so that it would all coincide.
Yeah.
So that's what that distance setting does.
That's like the tape measure version of it. Yeah, tape measure version.
Yeah. So if your subwoofer was 30 feet away, right, then it takes that much longer for it to get to your feet than the speakers that are 5 feet away or whatever. I said 10 feet away, right? It takes that much longer. So the subwoofer will get the sound that would start playing a little bit before your speakers would, if in an infinite space, space. But in your room, it takes a while for the sound from your subwoofer to bounce around your room and then resolve enough for you to perceive it, to hear it, because the sound waves are that much longer. So therefore, the subwoofer setting on your in your automated room system essentially sets the distance longer, as if your subwoofer were outside of your room, because of how long it takes that sound to resolve so that it can be perceived and measured and heard. And that's what the setting's different. So by changing it to be even longer, you're now delaying slightly how long
you're actually getting the subwoofer signal to be set out slightly earlier by telling it that it's physically farther away.
Right.
Now, I don't agree with this distance hack as described.
Right.
because
we do talk about this though.
Right. Because that is something that person found works in their setup. This notion of it's between 1 and 5 feet, and otherwise there's cancellations. That's a little bit of it worked in my setup, so I'm going to give it as advice to say that it's going to work in your setup too, and that isn't necessarily the case. Where they're a little bit on the right path, though, because this isn't a case of it's 100% wrong or 100% right. Where they're on the right path is that the automated systems, whether that's regular Dirac Live room correction or Odyssey, something along those, or WHVA, one of those, they are basing that distance setting just on time alignment. It's just on the idea of microphone position number 1, which we're assuming is going to be close to your main seating position. It's just getting all of the sounds to arrive at microphone position number 1 at the same time. So based on the physical distances of your different speakers and based on the room and subwoofer combo, because just think of your subwoofers and the room as all being one bass producing thing all together, but having that sound all arrive at microphone position number 1 at the same time. And that isn't necessarily the ideal setup either. So where this is on the right line of thinking is that, yes, sometimes what you do at the end of the process is you play a frequency sweep that starts a little bit higher, maybe like 500 hertz, right? And you play it through the whole system together, not just the subwoofer alone, all on its own. You play it through the system together and you play that 500 down to 20 hertz sweep. And you listen for, okay, can I spot when it makes that transition from the speaker to the subwoofers? We're listening in that crossover region. And it's like, okay, sometimes there is, after Odyssey or Dirac room correction or WHVA or something like that, after it's done its thing, it's like, oh, wait, I can clearly hear a dip or a hump right in that 100 hertz, 80 hertz type of region. And that is where a little bit of trial and error with that distance setting on the subwoofer can be beneficial sometimes. I'm not saying you never, ever touch what the automated system did. It's like, no, because all it's trying to do is time align the arrival of sound at microphone position number 1 doesn't mean that it automatically always nails that transition from speakers into subwoofer. So you want to listen to that sweep. You want to do that. And if you're hearing a dip or a hump, then yes, experiment. But it might be different than between 1 and 5 feet. It might be that you shorten the distance, not always lengthen it. It might be more or less than those amounts. That is specific to that guy's room. Okay, that works in his room. It turns out adding a little bit more works in his setup. That's fine. That's totally fine if he's done the listening or measured it in Room EQ Wizard and seen it on a graph or something like that, and this ameliorates that problem. This, though, is something that Dirac Live bass control attempts to do on an automated process. That's really in our AV receivers that don't have independent equalization for multiple subwoofers. They're still equalizing the subwoofer output, even if you have 2 or 4 subwoofer physical connections on the AV receiver. It's still equalizing all of those together as one. What it's really doing most in Dirac Live bass control in our AV receivers, if you have it, is that transition from subwoofers to speakers. It is playing the speakers and subwoofers together and then adjusting that crossover region. That's the primary benefit of Dirac Live bass control, but that's an added cost in pretty much all situations. Bass control is a paid add-on to the regular room correction systems. So, yeah. They're not 100% wrong, but they're also not 100% right. It's not quite as simple as it's always going to be make your distance setting 1 to 5 feet longer. That is going to be specific to that guy's room. But the general idea of checking afterwards to that crossover region between speakers and subs, that is right. And it might be solved by adjusting the distance setting in your AV receiver. Trial and error.
There are very few absolutes in home theater, to be honest with you. There's very few pieces of advice that are absolutely right every single time. Like, I can't say to you, this is the perfect field of view, because not everybody agrees with that. I can't say to you, this is the exact angle at which you should be
or the perfect
towing in your
distance,
speakers. Any of these things. So whenever somebody says they have an absolute hack, you should be questioning it. The only time that mean, one of the very few times that I can say that there is a true absolute is in positioning of subwoofers for best starting point of getting bass in your room, and that there's a slew of caveats that go along with that statement, but there is, that's about one of the few absolutes.
Which is spread them out. So you get them across the room from each other, not both on the same side of the room. Yes.
Yeah. So he uses a Denon X4500H, which has 2 independent subwoofer pre-outs, and Odyssey Multi-QXT32. So what's the best way to physically connect his 2 subwoofers? Does he follow the manual that says to plug the 2 subwoofers in the receiver's 2 subwoofer pre-outs and set the number of subwoofers in his receiver setting to 2, or does he follow the advice that says only to plug one of his subwoofers into the receiver and then plug the second subwoofer into a line out on his first subwoofer, a daisy chain connection path? I personally want to do either of those things, but it kind of depends on how your subwoofers are placed. Generally speaking, so what we want is to have your subwoofers to be playing as one unit. They are a single bass producing entity along with your room. Together, they all produce the bass that you experience. So the way that I set things up in my room previously, and I don't know the 4500H. I didn't think that you had this option to set them up as mono.
You don't.
But what you would...
if you tell it that you have 2, then it's doing the independent thing.
Yeah. And so what you don't want is to have them EQ'd separately, because they're not separate. They are one.
They won't ever be EQ'd separately in Multi-QXT32 with sub EQ HT. That's the whole independent dual subwoofer thing back then in that model year. They won't ever be EQ'd independently, but they will be given before the equalization is calculated, and this is the unfortunate part. They will be given independent distance and level settings. That's what Odyssey XT32 with sub EQ HT, it's going to give the two. If you tell it I have 2 subwoofers and you plug them both into those 2 subwoofer pre-outs, it's going to give them independent distance and level settings, and then it is going to equalize them together. And unfortunately, that doesn't always work because, again, the distance setting is just being based on sheer time alignment to microphone position number 1 and nothing else. And then it is attempting to level match those 2 things. But at that point, it has no idea if there's some huge hump or huge dip in the response where they're positioned versus mic position number 1. So when it just plays a sweep or pink noise tone to set the level, that might be inaccurate because of some huge hump or dip that hasn't been equalized yet. So that automated process can definitely be problematic if you use the 2 pre-outs and set it to say, I have 2 subwoofers right now, because unfortunately we don't agree with the way that it does the just time alignment based on 1 mic position and just trying to get the sounds to arrive at the same time, and the potential errors that can happen in the volume leveling as well. So our preferred method is honestly a Y splitter. You tell it, I have 1 subwoofer. You plug a Y splitter into subwoofer 1 pre-out, and then you have 2 RCA cables that go from that Y splitter, and they each go to your 2 subwoofers. Or we're perfectly fine with using a wireless subwoofer transmitter, and because your 2 subs are hopefully across the room from each other, you can have 2 receiving units that both connect to the same transmitter, and that's going to work fine as well. Daisy chaining is also okay if your subwoofers have a line out, because not all subwoofers have a line out, but if yours do, and the first subwoofer is just passing along an unadulterated signal, what I received is what I pass along to whatever gets plugged into my line out connection. That's totally fine. It's just that if your subs are completely across the room from each other, that might not always work for the wire path if you're doing it that way. So, but yes,
that's why I said that's not how I do it, because a lot of times getting that second wire is easier to go from the AV receiver than it is to go from the
daisy chained from the first subwoofer. But
Yeah,
daisy chaining is fine, but we're going to say you tell your receiver, I have 1 subwoofer, not 2. We wish it worked better. We wish we could rely on that automated setup more, but practically speaking, it just doesn't always work. We want a mono signal coming out of there and feeding both subwoofers the exact same signal from the AV receiver.
Yeah, and then what I would always do with mine is I would turn one subwoofer off after having plugged everything into the Y splitter and everything, turn one subwoofer off, and then start the EQ process. And the EQ process, the first thing it does is it level matches everything, and you'll usually get something on your screen that'll say, "This is your subwoofer is playing this volume,
and it needs
to be
zone.
higher." Yeah. It wants you to get into the green zone. So, usually what it's going for is 75 dB. I usually, pick a number below that, a little bit below that, usually 72, or would be, maybe 70, somewhere in that range. And and I set the first subwoofer's volume on the back to be so that it's reading out at that 70 or 72 or whatever number I decide it's going to be at. Then I turn that subwoofer off, turn the other subwoofer back on, and set that one so it's at the same volume on the screen. Now, you can do this with SPL meter. You can do this in a number of different ways, but this is how I did it with my XT32 receiver back in the day. And that way, both the subwoofers are outputting the same volume because they're operating as one one unified bass creating device. And then at that point, I turn them both on at the same time. And then if it says, "Oh, it's a little bit too hot," or "It's a little bit too low," or whatever, I just say, "Just do your thing, man. Shut up." Because what will happen? Yeah, I said, "Go ahead anyway," and then it will adjust the trim levels for the one sub it thinks it has, so that it is hitting where it's supposed to be hitting. And usually I won't mind if it boosts a little bit. So if it's a little bit under 75 or wherever it wants to be, then it's fine. And then at that point, you just kind of go on. So that's how
going to be a single distance setting that it is now set, which is going to be uniform to both of the subwoofers. We're going to get into a whole thing, not this week, because it's definitely going to be next week at this point, a whole thing about all the stuff that we're adjusting in the subwoofers themselves, stuff that we're not adjusting in the AV receiver, but adjusting in the controls of the subwoofers themselves prior to running the room correction, but that's all going to be coming up next week. I think maybe we can just do the section C, because that's pretty short, and that'll be it for this week.
I scrolled all the way to the top because you said it was going to be next week. Hold on. I gotta scroll down. C. Where's C? Odyssey Dynamic EQ, should that be on or off? What's the best setting for bass as far as that goes? Because the thing he noticed most was that with Dynamic EQ on, his surround speakers seemed way too loud. Dynamic EQ doesn't really affect your surround speakers.
It can. No, Dynamic EQ can affect your surround speakers. Absolutely, it can. So we just want to make it really clear. There's the two different dynamic things in Odyssey.
Yeah. It defaults to volume off and EQ on. That's what the default is.
Which we tend to like because Odyssey Dynamic Volume is the thing that just tries to make quieter sounds louder and louder sounds quieter. It is dynamic range compression. It's trying to make it so that explosions are not super, super loud and whispers are not super, super quiet, that everything is about the same volume to varying degrees because there's low, middle, and high settings for dynamic volume. Now, look, I have no problem. There's certain scenarios where that is helpful, having dynamic range compression. I'm not going to say never, ever use that feature, but it's just as a default, if I've got a dedicated theater, dynamic volume, I would keep off so that I am experiencing the entire dynamic range that the movie creator intended for me to hear. So dynamic volume, I typically leave off. Dynamic EQ is curves of equal loudness. So when you have your master volume set to 0 dB, we're using the scale where most of the master volume scale is negative numbers, the relative volume scale. Most of it is negative numbers, and then there's a 0 setting, and then there's a few values above 0 that you can crank the master volume up to. But what Odyssey does a really good job of doing automatically is setting things so that when your master volume is set to that 0 dB mark, that is equivalent to cinema reference volume. That is, if you have a movie that is properly mastered for the home release, on average, it'll be about 85 decibels, which is really, really loud, and the peaks will be 105 decibels out of your speakers, and all the way up to potentially 115 decibels from the dedicated low-frequency effects channel. That is cinema reference volume, that is THX reference volume, and that's what your 0 dB on your master volume dial will be. And with Odyssey Dynamic EQ turned on, there will be nothing changing when you have the master volume at 0 dB. It is leaving it alone. It is playing things exactly as they are. But as many of us prefer to do at home, we turn the master volume down below 0 dB because it's really, really loud. It's THX
really
reference volume. And Odyssey Dynamic EQ applies curves of equal loudness. We might have heard of these as the Fletcher-Munson curves, which was a whole study that was done decades ago at this point that realized that as you change the volume level, human ears don't detect all frequencies from the lowest note to the highest note that we can hear. We don't perceive them all evenly as we change the volume. We're much more attuned to hearing mid-range frequencies. The human vocal range, this is not a surprise, that's the thing we're most attuned to hearing. And when you turn the volume down, we start to lose the ability to hear deep bass the earliest. That goes away really quickly. And to some extent, the treble changes as well as we change the volume. So it's these different curves. There's also a thing just called the threshold of audibility. Given a certain note, given a certain frequency, how loud does it need to be for a human to hear it? And that is different across different frequencies. Bass frequencies need to be pretty darn loud for us to hear it whatsoever. The threshold of audibility for bass is pretty high, whereas mid-range frequencies, right, in that vocal region, that can be really quiet and we can still hear it. The threshold of audibility is really low. So dynamic EQ tries to compensate for all of that. You turn the master volume dial down, and it says, well, look, I just turned everything down uniformly. Everything got 10 or 15 decibels quieter. But now there's a sound in the deep, deep bass that is like below the threshold of audibility. It's just, it was fine up at 0 dB on the master volume dial, but now a human just can't hear it. And dynamic EQ goes ahead and boosts that back up to at least reach the threshold of audibility. That's really what it's about. Keep everything audible. So it's mostly boosting the bass when you turn the master volume dial down. But they did also do a thing in the surround channels, which is like, okay, we're better at hearing things that are in front of us than we are at hearing things that are behind us or above us. So if you turn the master volume down a lot, 25 dB, 30 dB down, which is not honestly that unusual, it does boost up sounds that are behind us and above us to, again, keep them audible in comparison to what's in front of us. So I'm a little surprised if you really noticed that your surround speakers got significantly louder, but you didn't notice that the bass got considerably louder. That's unusual. Normally, if you've turned the master volume dial down that much that you're noticing the surrounds got a lot louder, you'd be like, oh, compared to dynamic EQ turned off, the bass is way louder with it turned on because I can actually hear it, versus when I turn dynamic EQ off, I don't hear that bass anymore at all. It falls below the threshold of audibility. So our normal recommendation is to keep that turned on. It tends to be very nice to be able to still hear things that would otherwise have become inaudible by turning the master volume dial down. So in general, we like dynamic EQ on.
I like how you said that was going to be a short answer and then spent...
It was a short question. I miscalculated. Anyway, Ryan Part 2 will be up next week, and then Greg also had his question in that came in on Monday, so Ryan and Greg, you'll be first up next week.
Thank our listeners of the week. Thank those who went to avrant.com, clicked on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and sent us a PayPal donation in the past, as well as our current 130 patrons over at patreon.com. Thank you very much, including Nelson. Sorry, Nelson. Thank you very much.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, that's come to the website, paypal.com, if you want to do things that way, or patreon.com/AVRant podcast is where you can sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. So a big thanks to our 130 patrons over there. Nelson, thank you for being one of them.
We also got notes of gratitude from Mario, Ian, Nelson, and Henry. Thank you for thanking us.
Yeah, I'll say the names one more time. We got Mario, Ian, Nelson, and Henry. Thank you very much for your notes of gratitude and encouragement. We really appreciate them. And a big, big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
Okay. Next week, we are going 2 hours and not a minute longer.
Okey-doke.
So everybody hold on to your hats. I am laying down the law. Rob has pushed this too far. If you want to get your question answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. For AVRant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com.
This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.